Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping You Company, the podcast where Rukamanya and I discuss and ramble on about things which we find interesting, to keep ourselves company and to learn more things about us and the world around us, and hopefully to keep you company at home too. Good evening, Rook. How are you on this Sunday evening?
Hi, Scott Sword. I am doing well. I'm looking forward to keeping all of you company. And for the first time, we don't know what sort of situation this is going to turn into, but for the first time, live on Scott Sword's Twitch channel. So none of us know what's going to happen, but we got some actual people we're keeping company in real time this time. So an
Absolutely.
exciting step forward.
The podcast is living up to its name, hopefully. So yeah,
Hopefully.
we're doing this on live on Twitch. So yeah, hello to everybody listening on Twitch. Obviously, if you're listening back to this on YouTube, that's absolutely fine. I don't know if this will be a regular thing or a semi-regular thing or a one-time thing. We'll just have to see. But yeah, so this is going to be the September edition of the podcast. But we're recording this in the first third of August. We're in the 10th of August right now. We're actually recording this on a Sunday night. We've done this actually really well at work. Probably one of the first times that the podcast will go out on a Sunday, and we're recording it on a Sunday. So
Yeah, probably.
it's, it's finally worked out. So yeah, hello everybody in the Twitch chat. Feel free to ask questions as we go through various topics. If you've got anything you want to ask us, then feel free. I'll try and write down as many as I can. Um, or if there's any questions you think of as we have our discussion, then you can absolutely ping them in chat. And if I could lose them, then you can absolutely ask them again until we notice. So I think the first thing we normally do when we start these podcasts is a little bit of follow up from the previous episodes. I loved your comment
Yes.
for the August one because you didn't have too much to say.
No, no. Normally, I like re-listen to the episodes, and I sort of comment on anything that catches my like attention. That's like, I could have said this better, could have said that better. I said this, or I said I wanted to research this, and I've got time to research it, and I'll put up the information. There were a few points that I could have maybe looked into, like the pronunciation of. I'm gonna split the middle and say New Orleans
Oh right, yeah.
instead of instead of just letting that hang unaddressed in the air. But I felt like if I was going to do that sort of work, it would be more interesting to address it sort of in full in another episode. So I decided to let that one lie. I still haven't done the research, so don't ask me about it now.
We're
uh,
very bad podcasters. We haven't followed up on it.
no. But for like usually I come up with this whole list of things, and I, as always happens to me, I think I have one or two quick things to say, and then I look back at everything that I've written, and I've written like, a page and a half of notes or something, and then it all goes into this gigantic comment that I leave on the YouTube channel as like follow up. And for the first time, I listened to the podcast back, and I was like, yeah, this is just a conversation. I feel like I don't really have anything to correct, so I had nothing really extra to say.
Look at that. We're finally getting the hang of this. Excellent.
Finally,
There was
hitting
one
our stride.
in our stride, yeah. There was one bit of follow up I had because it actually,
Okay.
it just popped. It didn't. I'm bad. I don't listen back to the podcast unless there's something really in particular. When I think about it, all that could have been controversial. Let me listen back to it and see how it sounds. And there's also that episode we did a while ago where we had that whole railway
Yes.
interventions where we both had
Yeah,
stuff to add and edit
when we
back in.
learned that we're both really bad at talking about factual information.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had to go and edit. We actually had to do some editing, which is not normally how I do things. It was very off the cuff, this. Um, but there was, it popped into my head probably a few days after recording the podcast. I was like, I've got to keep that in my brain. Because obviously in the last episode, we were talking about childhood books and novels, and we went through various things. As well as also
Yes.
your Jane Austen project you got going on right now and all that sort of thing. But there was one author in particular that I really left off the list, and when it popped into my head, I was like, "You're an idiot! How could I not mention this particular author?" Well, I don't think I did. Now this is when I'm going to say the author's name, and then you're going to be like, "No, you actually did mention that person. What are you talking about?" That'll be then me being absent-minded, which is a thing, which is a bit of a theme with me at the moment. Blaming it on the pregnancy. But the writer in particular I wanted to bring up was Michael Mapogo. I don't know if that's a name that rings a bell. I don't know if his books have made it across the pond in any sort of great popularity.
Not only does that not ring a bell from last week, it doesn't ring a bell from anything. So,
Oh.
yeah, I think we may have stumbled across another important cultural divide here.
Well, so in terms of international audiences, he is probably most famous because do you know the film War Horse?
Yes.
Okay, so he wrote that. The novel that it's based on, he wrote it. Um,
Okay.
so
Cool.
so that's probably from international audience perspective, that's probably the most famous thing. The reason why I mentioned him in particular is because when I was in late primary school age, which we established in the last podcast, was between the ages of like 9 and 12, right? Primary school in the UK, or at least in Scotland, goes between the age of 5, more or less, and the age of 12, more or less, depending on where your birthday falls. So
Hmm.
when I was in sort of the late period of primary school, he was actually the children's laureate for the UK. I'm just going to double check.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I'm going to double check that that is the correct title because I don't want to get that wrong because then I will have to edit stuff afterwards. I just look at it. He's still alive. He's 81. But yeah, so is that yeah, he was the third children's laureate from 2003 to 2005. So again, I'm aging myself slightly, but and I actually had the pleasure of actually hearing a talk from him. He came up to um, sort of the biggest theatre in the area where I used to live in the north of Scotland, and he did a talk there. So I was able to go and see him, and somewhere in my childhood home, I've still got his autograph somewhere because we were able to get a book or a piece of paper signed from him afterwards. But
Oh, that's cool.
he was introduced to us because our head teacher at our primary school was really big into sort of class reading and things. And she
Hmm.
bought in first a collection of short stories from him, if I remember rightly. And we used to read them in class and things, or we'd all, like classic primary school stuff, right? Gather round the teacher would read out loud. But I just liked
Yes.
the book so much that I ended up buying quite a lot of them. Um, so I'm now trying to really remember. I've actually not read War Horse. I've seen the film recently. That's kind of why it was in my mind a little bit because I've seen the film for the first time relatively recently. Very very much a classic Michael Morpurgo storyline. If you start reading off his other books, you'll realize there are very similar themes that go through them. A lot of them are set during wartime Britain, Second World War. So he was born in 43. So he had, I mean, obviously the war would have finished in 1945, but he must have been quite fascinated with that time period and maybe conversations with if he had any older siblings or his parents. So a lot of his books are set around the World War II period. Maybe some of them might be in First World War. I'm not sure, but Second World War definitely. What do I think now? War Horse. I think was it First World War? There'll be somebody in the chat who'll be able to tell me if it's First World War or Second World War. Um, but yeah, so a lot of the his stories relate to relationships between people or relationships between humans and animals. He's really big into animals as well. One of the things um, he's got actually as a sort of a charity based thing that he does is I don't know if he still does it, but he used to send city children off to a farm that he
Hmm.
owned, or maybe helped organize with this charity to get children especially from the city, to connect with nature and things. So he's very much into that. So I'm actually looking at his bibliography right now. I didn't realize that War Horse was one of the first ones he'd actually written. It was much older. But I remember obviously as a kid, especially in primary school, I quite liked football. There was one that he wrote called Billy the Kid. That was about this really good footballer who ended up going to war and then coming back to live in the Chelsea area of London. There was one of my favourites was the amazing story of Adolphus Tips. That was about this relationship between a British, or I guess it would have been a British teenager when the war happened, and a young American soldier. But then after the war, many years later, when they were like 60s or 70s, they were able to get back together again. But there was also a cat involved with the story and all this sort of thing. Um,
Hmm.
I also had again, showing my age, the cassette tape of one of his novels called The Butterfly Lion. And again, there's another one about a young man having to go to war, and he said goodbye to his pet lion because he came from Africa originally. So yeah, there's a lot of very similar themes for his novels.
I
Um,
see. Yeah, that makes sense.
so yeah, it was just because of the fact that that was one of those things where we're talking about. books that we read at school or books that we read outside of school. That was one that was brought into the school, and I remember buying quite a lot of his books at that time and reading them. So yeah, I couldn't believe I didn't mention it. It just somehow passed me by when we did that previous recording. I was like, I've got to get his name in, because again, he's very very well known for now for Warhorse with the film, but a lot of his other stories are very good. So haven't read them back.
Yeah, that
now.
makes sense.
Yeah, I haven't read them back as an adult, so it'd be interesting to see how, as an adult brain, I would view the stories. But as far as I'm aware, they've, they sort of, what's the expression? They've survived the test of time, unlike
Mm-hmm.
certain other novels that maybe sort of alluded to a little bit
Yeah,
last time,
I,
where
I really.
some novels, maybe in hindsight, there's some things which in modern viewing, or would be a little bit controversial.
I
So
really doubt that if I were to go back and read a Goosebumps book now, I would be like, "Oh man, what a classic!"
but it doesn't matter. You had fun reading it as a kid, right? And that's all
Oh
that
yeah,
matters, really.
100%.
That's all that matters. So yeah, it was just because of that. I haven't read, obviously, because of now the age I am. I haven't read a lot of his newer books.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was a name that I forgot to mention, and I feel really bad for not mentioning it. And then there you go. That was the only follow up I had, really.
There you go. Well, I'm glad that you have mentioned it now.
We've got a little question in the chat about the footage. So yeah, so for the podcast we have different background footage. Sometimes it's of video games I've played, but what I also did was last year on my summer break, I did a lot of recordings on my mobile, much to the annoyance of Mrs. Scott's sword after a while, of all the different locations that we visited. So we did some from Germany and Prague, and where else? We had one of a bus ride through Edinburgh. What other places? There are probably more. This one's a bit of a mixed bag. It's just all the leftover footage that's not really long enough for an episode on its own. Is all stitched together. So we've got some woods that my wife and I visited up in the Highlands. And now you're seeing on screen a very foggy Edinburgh. We saw Edinburgh in the sun in some of the other videos I've posted. But now we've got Edinburgh in the fog. This was my last day in Edinburgh before flying back to Spain the end of last summer, and we just attended a wedding, and I had to run out to return the kilt and things, and just the atmosphere of the city. I've always talked about this, how Edinburgh is one of these cities where in the sunshine it's beautiful and with all the parks and everything, but then when the darkness rolls in or when there's a lot of fog, the atmosphere in this city really changes, and you think about the historical context of the city and all the things that have happened with grave snatchers and all this sort of thing, right? And it creates this really
Yeah.
cool eerie vibe. So I had to, even though I was rushing because we were like, we need to return the kill, I have to go back to the hotel, I have to pack, I have to get to the airport. I tried to take like 5-10 minutes of footage. And then also later on you also see the ceiling of the place where the wedding took place, and it was just when we were having after the meal, we were just relaxing. I looked up, and the way that the wedding sort of party lights were hitting against the roof and things, I thought, oh, this could be quite nice background footage. I'll just, as we're talking with people, I'll just lay my phone on the table and just record it. So just yeah, so it's a bit of a hodgepodge of stuff. But as you said beforehand, that is what our podcast is. So I hope you enjoy all the footage. It'll be nice and calming things to have in the background.
Right, of course. Yeah, you're mentioning it's interesting. I'm getting to because I've been going through continuing my readings of the John Rebus series. You're mentioning sort of Scotland and its changeable weather and different sort of eerie and moods and all the history and all that. And the book that I have just finished in that series was talking about to some extent the resurrection men, right? The people who would go around unearthing graves, and then Burke and Hare, the people who didn't wait for people to die, they just were killing people and then submitting the bodies for the autopsies.
Right, all in the name of scientific advancement.
Of course. Gotta, do these things. What sacrifices must be made for the anatomists.
Exactly, for the greater good.
That's right. The greater good.
Cut it. Anyway, carry on. Sorry, Hot Fuzz.
Yep.
Hot Fuzz reference.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
So
it's cool that now you're getting to see some images of Edinburgh then, and maybe try and you can piece together a little bit of John Rebus's world and the city that he comes from and the way it shapes people. It is the National Gallery, very good. Yeah, there is the National Gallery of Scotland. Yes, on the mound in between the two Prince Street Gardens. Very good, very observant Twitch chat. I like it. So yeah, it's Edinburgh's just a magical place, and it has all this history. We know with all the and also from author's perspective, right? Arthur Conan Doyle was from there, and then all the different scientific advancements and things. Um, oh, apparently there's a sign on the video that says the National Gallery of Scotland. Okay, well, very good. Wait, you noticed the sign? I can't see that because my screen is too small. So very good. um, the thing I was going to actually, I had a little follow up question because I know as you're going through the Rebus stuff. We did talk. We like to talk about language differences and slang and things, and I haven't actually followed up on any slang related things for this episode. But I did wonder, do you end up having slight issues in terms of the language? Like, the way that Ian Rankin writes, he will slip in a little bit of, Scottish slang or dialect differences. Is there any time where you're struggling in terms of, or certain words that are new to you, or just in terms of from context, you're not sure what they're on about?
there are definitely things that are unusual for the most part, and there are things that I don't like fully know. But for the most part, the context is usually enough to get me through, right?
Hmm.
Sort of like that short clip that you sent me for the last episode, where if you were to give me this phrase on its own and be like, okay, pop quiz, what does this mean? I wouldn't be able to tell you the answer. But if you put it in the conversation, I'm trying to remember what the one was. It was some Cockney rhyming slang that I was like, I would never be able to get this if you were just like, what's the third like unspoken meaning? What's this Cockney rhyming slang for? Oh, Adam and Eve it.
Add and Eve it, yeah.
And the way that the guy said it, like in the can you Adam and Eve it, right? Like it just sounds to me like can you believe it?
Mm,
So like when you have the help of that surrounding context, I'm generally able to get a sense for what Ian Rankin's prose is signifying. And I've had that experience not just with like Ian Rankin, by the way, but also like older books that I've read, like classic crime noir fiction, for example, where there's a lot of famous like words and phrases that are like old timey American slang that nobody uses anymore,
mm,
and you just sort of have to be like, well, what does this mean? But a lot of the times, and if you just look up a list, which I've done, right? So before I decided I want to start reading some of these classic novels, right? Like uh, The Long Goodbye, a lot of Raymond Chandler stuff, The Big Sleep, like all these classic, uh, works of noir fiction and the hard-boiled detective genre. I would look up these lists of like vocabulary terms and be like, "Oh, how am I ever going to understand this?" Because I was like, I tried to like, I wanted to be like, I'll familiarize myself with the lingo and then go in. And I was like, I don't know. And then I started reading them, and it was like I didn't even need to bother looking up those lists because it's so clear from the context what's going on. And if it's unclear, that's when I can go and look up a very specific thing.
right. Yeah, I think that's a kind of an interesting point. Again, we did talk about it last time. Context just makes everything so much clearer. You get a sense. Even learning, it doesn't have to be a slang word, right? I've known it from Spanish, where learning that as a language, even if you don't know exactly what the word means from the context of everything else, you can kind of piece things together naturally, and the sense of what the word is, unless it's something very very technical, and then it might be
Yeah,
very critical to know the exact meaning. But yeah, in the sense of
there was
like,
a moment.
not you go.
Go ahead.
I was say in the sense of two characters having a conversation. If it's
Hmm.
not an extremely technical conversation, you can very much sort of get through just from context alone.
Yeah. There was a moment when I was reading Japanese, and this brings me to sort of the follow-up thing that I was thinking we might be able to touch on in this episode, because one of my ideas for talking about our various experiences with media is like what it's like to experience that because we both had experiences living in other cultures. Sort of talk about what that experience is like engaging with that sort of media in a different culture surrounded by people who speak a different language than you would have been originally. So one of the things that I started to do once my Japanese got good enough and I was living in Japan was I would just read Japanese novels. And there was this one book, I think it was what I talk about when I talk about running by Murakami Haruki. And there was this one passage where I went through and I didn't know this one particular grammar point that he was using, but it was clear enough from the context that I was able to guess like what the content was. And then I looked it up in my grammar book later on, and it was like, yeah, right. Which, if anyone was, it was like nukitsu nukaretsu, which the way it was used in the sentence, it sounded to me like he was talking about another, like himself and another runner, himself as a runner and another person running a race, passing each other back and forth, essentially. And the way that that's conjugated in Japanese, it's like nuku is like to go through, and so in this sense, we're talking about to pass. So you're doing the act of passing, and then you're in the in the passive voice in the sense of being passed. And I was like, I bet that's a general sort of trend, and that sort of nukitsu nukaretsu isn't just that one verb, it's a bunch of other potential verbs. And this is like a grammar point, like alternately doing this and this, right?
Mm,
Having this, doing this and having it done to you.
right.
And I looked it up in the grammar book later, and sure enough, yeah, that's exactly what it means. And I was like, oh, I felt so powerful. I was like, I did it without a book. I did it without having to look it up. It was incredible.
New level unlocked. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm at the point where, because I think my Spanish language is, it's still that stage we talked about it in the whole language learning episode, where my language level has advanced a lot over the last,
Mm-hmm.
year, 18 months or so. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
it's still quite fragile in the sense that I will still make sometimes rudimentary mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things that we were talking about, like dialect or slang or more complex vocabulary, more technical vocabulary, depending on what it is, that's a lot of that is still out of my reach at the moment. So reading a
Mm.
book is a little bit intimidating to me, but it's something I'm going to have to try. But that's the thing, trying to pick up on nuance is also really hard when you've got that's a really sort of very high level thing you have to try to do to understand things like slang or whatever. Even though it is
Yes.
such, as it's been mentioned in the Twitch chat, that can be, it's such a
Uh-oh.
my mic is just turning itself off. Woo! Um, yeah, slang and informal language is such a big part of day-to-day speech.
Mm.
And also their media and things. But obviously, as a non-native, you don't learn that, especially if you're learning from the conventional sense, from more classroom textbook perspective. You're not just dumped in the environment, and you have to find your way around, kind of thing. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it's quite intimidating, the idea of picking up a book and trying to read it. But yeah, I need to press forward. I need to do these things and just stop consuming so much stuff in media. I think that's a problem when you've got, especially when you live with somebody who is so into English language media, like my wife is.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about adaptations a little bit later on, but right now she's watching Kill Bill, right, in English, and
Mm-hmm.
she loves all the Jane Austen adaptations in English and all this, right? She doesn't watch dumb
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Um,
I'm curious, do you watch it subtitled?
um, she does, just in case there is any. Partly also because then she doesn't have to strain herself to listen sometimes if she's a little bit tired, but also just in case there is slang or pronunciation that is problematic. I think actually, now I think about it, she's watching Kill Bill right now without subtitles, and I was struggling to, because I think quite a lot of it's set down in Texas, and I was really having to strain the parts of it where I was listening along with her. I was really straining myself to try to listen to or try to understand what was being said. Um, but yeah, I guess it depends on, if it's a film that she knows very well, then she won't watch it with subtitles. If I was going to watch something in Spanish, yeah, I would definitely put subtitles on.
Mm-hmm.
Just especially when Spanish people get very incensed and passionate, they speak so fast that it's very tough to sort of piece together what is being said, and you can pick up on some keywords, but you miss enough of the bits in between. That's then very
Mm-hmm.
hard to try and understand. I've got now the same problem in Catalan. I can
Hmm.
read Catalan. I could probably understand it. But we've had quite a lot of instances lately, especially going to the antenatal class, right? Because that's an environment I can't control. A lot of the other stuff I've done, like I learned to drive, but I was able to learn to drive in Spanish because I was able to dictate that environment and say to the teacher, "I can't speak Catalan. Can we speak in Spanish?" But when we go to the antenatal class, and I've said this before in other podcasts we've done, where Catalan people are very fluid with their use of the language, and a lot of the time, in particular, that Catalan speakers sometimes find it very difficult to speak Spanish, even though they can do it perfectly, or in a fluent sense. They're not speaking like a non-native. They know how to speak fluently, even if they might mix up the two languages a little bit, but that's just natural with bilingual societies. But um, we don't have often have it in the antenatal class, where then suddenly it starts off in Spanish, and then at some point, I don't know what happens, but at some point it just switches to Catalan, and I'm just like, oh my god, right? And I'm trying to pick up on. I can understand key words or words which are very similar to Spanish, but then I might miss that really important conjugation, or which changes the tense, or that really important no at the beginning of a verb. I might just miss it, and then I get the completely opposite end of the stick in terms of what they're trying to say. It can be quite a tough one. So yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
problem with language learning, right? There are certain environments where you can control and say, I'm going to learn it this way
Hmm.
or do it with this language or with subtitles or not, blah, blah, blah. And other times you're just thrown at the deep end and you've got to try to navigate your way around it as best as possible.
Yeah, very true. Someone in the chat, I'm going to get your name wrong, Zania DMK, is pointing out that Portugal doesn't have a culture of dubbed movies, only subtitles. And this is sort of one of the things that I was curious about when I was asking you if you watch with subtitles or not, is because Japan is similar, where if they're showing an American movie, which a lot of the time they are, right? Because Hollywood movies are a powerhouse. We've talked about this on the podcast before. America has sort of extended its culture, exported its culture around the world in a way that is unusual. And so there are a lot of American movies that will get played in Japan, and most of the showings will be subtitled rather than dubbed into Japanese, right?
Hmm.
They do have some Japanese dubbing that they do, like, but every time, I mean, I would always, of course, because I'm a native English speaker, go to the subtitled movies, right? Because I want to see the movie in my own language. But it was really interesting to me because in the States, good luck trying to get them to show a movie subtitled, right? They always want to show a dub. And they sort of refuse to engage. Like, maybe an art house cinema will put up a foreign language film and have subtitles. But the vast, vast majority of movies, especially if they're going to be popular, like they have to be dubbed into English. And Japan was this interesting sort of moment where I was like, oh, most of these aren't dubbed. And that's great for me. But it's a cultural difference that I wouldn't have expected, and it sort of worked out. It also, I think, improved my Japanese reading skills because after a while, I was like, I can read the subtitles in these movies. And so I was just habitually reading. This was really good training for me as a translator, was to read the Japanese subtitles for English films because it was an exercise in seeing all the sorts of decisions that translators have to make when they're thinking about how is this going to be presented to a native Japanese speaker when it's in English. And sometimes they change things. And sometimes they have to. Sometimes it's because of the format. Sometimes it's because of the culture. Sometimes it's because of this, that, and the other thing. And so I think watching a lot of movies, like, U.S. based movies in Japanese theaters, uh, reading the subtitles really helped like propel me forward in terms of my like the way I think about translation and also the way that I'm able to read Japanese. Now I think some of that's fallen off. I actually have started thinking maybe I should like create a Japanese language based like iTunes account or something, Apple account, so that I can start getting movies and put up the Japanese subtitles even if I'm watching in English because I feel like my reading skills have like slowed. Even though I'm using my reading skills all the time when I'm translating, I don't have that like time pressure of they're going to get to the next scene, so they have to go very quickly. Uh, and so I feel like it's slowed down a little bit because I don't have that like constant pressure. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting sort of moment, like for me culturally, and then also important to me as a translator. And then I will say, the same person goes on to say that in Portugal, at least, they even dub or subtitle the cartoons, which that is a level that even in Japan they don't do. Because I remember going to see a movie, I think it was one of the Star Wars Clone Wars movies or something, and it was a cartoon. And so that meant there were no subtitled showings to be found because they're like, oh, of course, if it's kids, we have to dub it into Japanese. It's a cartoon, it's for kids, it's got to be dubbed into Japanese. And I was just like, does it though? It was pretty
Well, I
funny.
guess then TV cartoons must be the same then. That
Yeah,
they get
probably. I haven't
dubbed.
watched a lot of Japanese TV, to be fair. So,
Hmm. In Spain, it's different. I think because Spanish is probably one of the few languages that can really compete with English on the global scale. I know obviously there are more English speakers when you can start considering second language speakers as well. But in terms of first language speakers, there are actually more Spanish than English native speakers. So because of that, even though maybe the Spanish speaking film industry isn't maybe so internationally renowned per se compared to the American one, as we said, it's the especially Hollywood is very invasive. It invades almost all countries, and
yeah.
there is still a huge appetite for Spanish language, so a lot of the things are dubbed.
Hmm.
um uh yeah, they're all dubbed. So, I mean, some of the dubs I really don't think are necessary. There's a lot of films, especially American films, which are showed on Spanish TV, which to me feel like very low budget films.
Hmm.
And I think those ones I don't really think there should be a need to dub them. If you're gonna dub like a Hollywood blockbuster or something, I can maybe understand it. But um, yeah, the more sort of we got C-list celebrity type C-list actors and things in these slightly lower budget films about suburban life in America or something. I don't think they need to be dubbed. I think it'd be fine with just subtitles. But just there's I think a lot of the no disrespect to these countries, but it's just because of population size. Portugal is a much smaller population than when you think about Scandinavian countries. I know are very good at speaking English because they learn English from a very young age because all of their media is mostly imported, but then they don't necessarily dub them so much. So I think that's a big deal, and that's kind of maybe why certain countries will dub and others won't. The thing that, as a reverse, the thing that really annoys me is when you watch the English news, and if they show, I don't know, the German chancellor or the Spanish president or whoever on the TV giving a speech, they will show the person talking. You'll hear the Portuguese or the Spanish or the French or whatever language it is, but then you hear the English dub on top, and that really does
Uh,
my head in. I'm just like, you don't need to dub this. This is not something that needs to
hmm.
be dubbed. Just put the subtitle on the screen and just have the initial like. And I think it might make I British people a little bit more open-minded to hearing other languages at times. Double, yeah, we're talking about it. Yeah, they're saying in the Twitch chat, double audio. I hate double audio. You don't need that. It's very distracting to listen to. First of all,
Yeah.
it's not a pleasant experience. But also, do you need to really dub this 10-second clip of the French president talking about something? No, just put the subtitle. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just does my
Yeah.
head in.
I've had experience with news broadcasts and things similarly. I completely agree with you. It's pointless. Just subtitle it. And the doubled audio is especially egregious if you like, even if you understand both languages, it's more distracting.
Yeah,
So I don't know why they do it. The Every now and then I'll get what it'll be like. Okay, I'll get the first sentence, and then they just completely dub over it, and then that one's also somewhat like the first sentence and then the last sentence I can hear in the original language,
yep.
and then all the middle is like done over, and I'm just like, well, based on like the way this opened and ended, I feel like something's getting crushed in this like translation that you're giving me. I don't know how much I trust you. What are you doing? It's a very weird situation.
So, there's something come up in Twitch that's saying that maybe the target audience for the news has elderly people, and sometimes it can be hard for them to use. But you can put the subtitles up automatically. That can override the subtitle function in the TV, where you're not using subtitles just to listen ordinarily. They're just going to be forced subtitles that appear on the screen because you're listening to somebody who's speaking a foreign language. And it's only for 10 seconds. I don't really think it's going to be if you're in a situation where it's a long form um, speech that you're translating live or something, like in the European Parliament, where if someone's speaking in
Right.
French, you got all the translators or interpreters then relaying all of that. If you're watching the Spanish broadcast, then it will all be dubbed, quote unquote, into
Hmm.
Spanish or whatever languages. In that situation, I understand it. But when it's on a news program and you've edited it and you know this is the tiny little segment that you want to show on the news, I don't think it caused too many issues. But I don't know. There may be another good reason, but I'm glad that a lot of us are in the chat very much against the double audio. Worse than dubbed audio, it's then double audio. It's even worse.
Yeah, for sure.
The one I
Yeah,
found.
it reminds me of this one clip. This is sort of nothing, but it was really funny to me. Japan got really into the idea of them hosting the Olympics back when
Oh.
they were selected, not, in their recovery after World War II, but the much more recent one. I forget exactly what year it was. This past Olympics, I think it was.
Uh,
Um, they got
yeah.
really excited about hosting the Olympics. And so I had to watch on Japanese TV, which I don't even watch that much Japanese TV. So this came across as too much, even to me who doesn't have it on very much. This constant clip of the reveal of where they were going to host. And so they have the like Swedish head of the like Olympic decision committee or whatever, like flip over this card and say, Tokyo. And they don't even bother to like subtitle or dub over or translate. It's such because it's such a short little sound clip, and a Japanese person can understand what he's saying. But just that one little clip of Tokyo, yay, and then like that on TV just constantly. It was so annoying.
Oh.
And the Japanese people were so excited. Everyone I talked to was just so thrilled to have the Olympics coming there, like this big, huge deal on the world stage.
Oh.
And I was happy for them, but it was at the same time, I was like, I wish they'd stop playing that clip.
So we got some memories in the chat about because obviously London hosted the Olympics now 13 years ago, which is crazy to say because I do remember when it was on, of course, and I watched it every night after work. But yeah, they showed the reveal clip a lot. And yeah, that was I always say that 2012 Olympics, even though it was post-economic crisis in Europe and everything, for me that was peak UK. Everything from 2012 onwards has just been it's been a downward slide since then. But yeah, that was peak UK. It was a great summer when it was on. So I'm glad to hear that the people from Japan were the same because I know sometimes there's a lot of reservation when the Olympics come to town because it's all overblown and all this sort of thing. But I was going to say the thing that I get, which is something a bit of a culture. I can't remember if we talked about this, but a big culture shock that I found coming from the UK to Spain was on the news the amount of times they repeat clips. Now, just to be clear,
Uh,
I'm aware how rolling news works, chat. I'm fully aware if they show the news story again, I understand they're going to show the same clips. I've not got an issue with that. But when they're talking in one segment about a story and they'll literally show the same little video clip of whatever the footage is over and over and over and over, I'm just like, I don't need to see this. I don't need to see this for the 10th
mhm.
time. On British news, that does not happen. I guess it also depends on what news channel you watch. On the BBC News, we, uh, the mainstay mainstream news channel that a lot of British people watch, it does not happen. It's something that I've never ever seen. So it was a huge shock when I then came over to Spain and I saw that, and it was fairly common. It's just it was quite a shock to me. You don't have to show the same thing 10 times. I've seen it once. We get it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think Japan has quite the same issue with like repeated showing of clips, but the thing that really was a culture shock moment for me in watching Japanese news is the number of shows where their way of like introducing every story is to have like a big poster board with like newspaper clippings on it, and they've got like an elastic cover like you would peel off the back of a sticker over like masking the news headline, and they just unpeel the headline and it's like, here's this clipping of a newspaper headline, this is our first story, and they talk about that, and then they're like, okay, story number two, and then they peel off the next clipping and it's like, okay, this is newspaper headline number two, this is our next story. And like, it works, it does the job. You get to the end and you've got a list of all the newspaper headlines of all the topics they covered, and it makes for like a big reveal in the moment. But it's just so strange to be like, I'm coming from, the country where everyone has this major like VFX package that they're using to spice up the news and make it exciting. And here's Japan just being like, we cut up a newspaper and here's all these headlines.
Uh, No, they don't do that in Spain, fortunately, nor in the UK for that matter. The UK version of that is just they sit people down with the physical newspapers, and they just flick through the newspapers and talk about what's going on. That's the British version. It's very subdued. British news in general is quite subdued.
Hmm.
um, Although I have noticed, especially online, things are coming a little bit more clickbaity and things. But that's more inside like the tabloid newspapers and things. But yeah, the mainstream TV news in the UK is very subdued by comparison.
Interesting.
It's still maintaining that sort of British tradition of stiff upper lip, serious at all times kind of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, no,
I
don't
feel like
don't
the
don't touch things.
Japanese like presentation of news is also fairly formal and like neutral. They try to be as neutral as possible. Although it was pretty funny because I do remember, I think this was on my walk that I did across Japan, because it was just this small local news station that I had on because it wasn't a big one, or this probably would never have happened. But they always have like two people who are like the news anchors, and there's usually a bit of banter back and forth between them. Not what we would call like banter, but they have conversation back and forth.
Hmm.
And there was this one news channel that I clicked on, and it was stunning to me because I'd never seen anything like this on Japanese TV, where there was a woman who was a news anchor and a guy who was a news anchor, and the woman was carrying like all of the stories. And they got like halfway through the thing, and she turned over to the guy and she was like, "Just say something already."
Get out. Someone got called out.
Yeah.
We've
Don't
got
just sit there and read the story. Say something. I was like, "Whoa, on Japanese TV."
wow.
That was unusual.
There was a lot of pent up anger there. That'd been going on for quite a few months, clearly.
Yeah, I could say. Yeah. You can presume a lot from that one exchange.
Yeah. Uh, we've got a bit of a tradition on British news of a lot of outtakes. A lot of time it's been news anchors or weather presenters have been caught swearing on live TV. They think they're off air, but they actually aren't, and they're flipping like the audience. Well, they're not flipping the audience. They're flipping like the weather presenter will be flipping the bird, as you'd call it, right? Giving the middle finger
Ah.
to
Mm-hmm.
the news presenters through the camera, but they don't realize they're on live on air.
Oh, yeah.
And all this sort of thing. There's also the thing that happens in the UK. Um, we have in the especially in the in the morning you'll have the British news which is running for like 3 hours or whatever, and then in between they'll have little segments, or then at the 6 o'clock news they'll do the main British news, and then you go off to the news where you live, and it'll take you to the regional BBC office, and that's where you do you talk about what's happening in Scotland, and then whatever, and also the Scottish weather specifically as well. And after that segment ends, then the news ends or transition to the next program. And you always see this moment where the weather presenter is walking across the studio to start talking to the news anchor as like the not the credits, but as the you hear the end of the news music, and they're panning
Mm-hmm.
out. It's like this is the end of the news. What are they saying to each other? What awkward small talk are they trying to make as the program is ending? I always wonder what on earth they're saying, and imagine if the mics were accidentally not turned off.
Yeah,
Some
I
of the
wonder.
things that you'd hear. So it always makes me. Whereas in Spain they don't do that. Well, at least in the news that I
Hmm.
watch, um, they have the news, and then it goes to like a commercial break. Like again, in BBC News, there's no commercial breaks, so that's a thing that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen. But they go to commercial break, and then the weather presenter is completely alone, and they will do
Mm-hmm.
the weather forecast, and then they just literally walk straight off the set past the camera, and then that's the end of
Wow.
the weather forecast, and then it'll go into something else. It's very strange.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Sometimes they just pretend to type at their computer or something, or if they don't have a computer, they'll have their sheets of paper with their notes. I don't even know if there are notes on them. They have sheets of paper, and then you see them pick up the piece of paper and straighten the pack and all this sort of. It's like, oh my god, you're just trying to fill up time for these last 5 seconds before you're off air.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh dear, oh dear. Yeah, yes, exactly. Shuffling the blank sheets. Yes, yeah. That's the one. There's a comment in here we're saying that British news is very subdued, and then Snuffleupagus, friend of the podcast, has said, except on question time. So I have to. That's a cultural thing. I'm sure you'll have
Ooh.
an American equivalent. So question time is a British TV program. It's on BBC, and it's normally I think on a Thursday night. Again, British people, you probably correct me. I've been away from the country for too long. I think it's normally on a Thursday night around 10 o'clock. And it's or no, after the news, maybe it's like 10:30, and it's a political debate program. So automatically you can tell, okay, well, if it's political debate, it's not going to be calm. And it's
Right.
normally you've got the host and you've got a panel of maybe I think 5 people, depending on what the week is, and they'll have somebody from Labour, somebody from Conservatives, and then there'll be 3 other random people. There'll be somebody from one of the other parties, and then we'll have 2 other people, and you're like, okay, what are these 2 people supposed to contribute to this discussion? I'm not too sure. And then they got a live audience, and they'll take questions from the audience, and they'll debate different things. So yeah, that's obviously not calm. But politics is never calm in that sense. Britain has fallen into the trap of politics becoming very divisive and a little bit shouty, which is very funny because when you see them in the House of Commons, it is like the most archaic way of functioning. I don't know if you know anything about like the House of Commons and the weird rules that it has.
Almost nothing.
I'm going to post it in the
I've
Discord
seen.
because it's going to be quite a
Yeah.
cool thing for especially people who are not British, even people who are British. You might not know about these rules. It's very strange. It's very old-fashioned the way they do certain things. So the House of Commons, where the it's the lower house of the UK Parliament, in case people need a distinction. So that's where the Prime Minister is and the government is, and then you got the opposition party. But it's not circular because
Okay.
it is the 2 parties literally face each other. Um, and there's lines on the floor, and it's something to do with the fact that you can't if you're trying to debate your opponent on the other side of the house, you can't cross over this line. I think it's something to do with the old days where you'd be more than a sword's length away.
Oh, okay.
Because obviously this parliament dates back to medieval times, so there was obviously very strange conventions.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot call anybody by name. You have to call them, and depends now if it's somebody in your party, you call them my honourable friend. I think if they're a member of the government, so that if they're not just the governing party, but they are one of the cabinet ministers, you have to call them my right honourable friend or something. There's a small distinction, and then you have to say if it's for somebody opposite, you have to say the right honourable member of, and then you say the constituency, like the little region where they represent. It's
Mm-hmm.
mental. It's very,
Oh,
and
that's
you can't call anybody a liar either. If you cannot use the word lie in the chamber. In the sense you
oh
can't,
wow.
even if you know that the person across from you has told a deliberate lie to the house, you can't just stand up and go, you lied. You have to go through this protocol where you have to say the right honourable member of blah 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 has misled the house, and you have to go through all this protocol, and then the person doesn't apologize for lying. They have to say I'm sorry for misleading the house and all this sort of thing.
Wow. That
It's
is that is right out of Jane Austen though.
yeah.
Like I can definitely the way that they refer to other people in those books, it's like, okay, this is Mrs. So and so and Miss, last name most of the time, but sometimes Miss first name last name. Sometimes Miss last name changes because of who is or isn't in the room. And sometimes it's like Mr. So and so. Sometimes it's so and so. Like I was just reading an annotation. I can't remember like the full purport of it, but it was just reading an annotation about the usage of Esquire, which is
Uh,
another thing that gets thrown in there sometimes. And there's just this very minute like detailed rules of etiquette for how you're supposed to refer to other people in polite society.
mm,
And it's really like strange to like look back, be reading and be making these distinctions. In some ways it reminds me of Japanese because Japanese has these like honorifics where it's like so and so kun, so and so sama, so and so chan, right? Like all these different ways of indicating relationships with the person that you're talking to or talking about. And that permeates like both very formal Japanese speech, but also even informal Japanese speech. And going back to these sorts of rules for titles and how you're referring to people in English is also very like in that spirit, I think. So it's interesting for me to like read back and be like, English kind of used to be like this too. And like if you have a servant, right, they're like depending on how important they are, they might be just called by their first name, or they might be called by their last name. Or if it's a very important servant in a very important house, they might actually get like a Mr. or a Mrs. last name, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. I think that the whole surname thing is also stemming from private schools, especially in England. I don't know so much in Scotland, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of private school culture where everyone's known by their last name rather than by their first name. The word like esquire, we use that now almost ironically. We just drop the e
Oh,
and say squire, but we mean that
hmm.
in a very ironic sense. It's not you're not saying it respectfully if you use it. Um, there's a comment in the chat which I thought was really funny. It says, Determinator said, the best thing ever was when an MP, member of parliament, one of these politicians, said, half of the people opposite are crooks. The speaker, so there's, again, you have a speaker in the American
Yes,
Congress, right? We're the one who's controlling the debate and things. So the speaker
right.
forced him to retract. So he said instead, half of the people opposite are not crooks. But there's a lot of protocol that I didn't. I watched a video about it, which I'll pop in the Discord. And there's a new Labour MP who's only been in the Parliament for about a year, and he was explaining how he actually got told off by the Speaker on one occasion because there was a debate happening in the chamber, and he left his seat to leave the chamber. He went the wrong way. Basically, what he
Oh,
did was he walked in front of the person who was speaking, and when you're speaking in the chamber, you're actually directing all of your chat to the speaker. And you'll hear them when they do like prime minister's questions, and they always say, Mr. Speaker, blah 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 blah, or Mrs. Deputy Speaker, blah 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 blah, right? Whoever's in charge that day of that session. But nobody else is able to walk in between the speaker and the person who is addressing the House with a particular debate point or whatever. So yeah, this Labour MP got told off for it. He had to walk around the other
wow.
way. And when you enter and leave the chamber, you also have to bow to the speaker's chair as like a sign of respect and all this sort of thing. And
That's
yeah, it's crazy.
I really feel like the old culture of England is very similar to Japanese culture. I could have finished your sentence when you said they have to bow before they leave. I was
Yeah, and then there's no electronic voting. So if they want to vote,
well, that's mhm.
the way they have to, I don't know how it's done in America, but the way they vote in the UK Parliament, and I only really learned about this after watching a lot of Brexit related debates at the time. All the MPs have to vacate the chamber, and they literally have to re-enter going through two different lobbies. There is the yes or the I lobby and the
Mhm.
no against lobby, and you literally just funnel your way through the lobbies that you want. And there's a lot of situations with these Brexit votes, because these votes a few years ago were very, very tense. The chief whips, again, I don't know if in America you have this concept of a whip. A whip is the
Oh, we do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
So anybody who's from abroad and maybe doesn't know, a whip is basically a member of a political party whose job it is basically to make sure that everybody else in the party doesn't rebel against the party's position on a particular vote. And there's all these stories of these whips literally grabbing, manhandling these politicians that were trying to rebel and trying to drag them across into the other lobby and all this sort of thing. There's
Wow.
some crazy stuff happening. Um,
Yeah, I think I could be wrong about this because I don't watch a lot of congressional proceedings, but I think like we don't do electronic voting either, to my knowledge, but we just like take verbal calls or like they call for different signals for assent or dissent, right? Um, but I don't remember anybody manhandling people,
oh
but we
no,
do have like, party whips that are supposed to be like, you're going to vote along party lines, right? What do I have to
or
do to
else.
get you to vote the right way? Yeah.
Oh, Snuff is saying
Oh,
apparently
never
that
mind. Snuff.
yeah, Snuff's coming with a
Yeah.
knowledge bomb.
Yeah.
There is
Snuff
electronic
is saying there
voting.
is electronic voting in Congress, and Snuff would know. Snuff knows much more about these things than me. I could just tell from the questions he submitted for that quiz. Um,
Ah, they
he's
don't.
gonna okay.
Ah, interesting. They don't allow remote voting. Ah, interesting. Okay. The thing that they do in the UK one too is kind of interesting. If you know you're going to vote a certain way, if it's a very key vote, and but you know for some reason you're going to be absent from the chamber, you can try to find somebody who would vote opposite to you, and you both basically decide, okay, we're not going to vote. they both not abstain from voting, but they basically say, right, our votes cancel out.
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's so because normally in the UK a lot of the votes are passed just by simple majority. There are certain votes where you need to have an actual, plus, over 50% to pass
Right.
certain things. But a lot of things is just who has more votes. Basically, it depends on what the
Hmm.
vote is. Um, the one I found very interesting from I now can't remember what the vote was for. Was it for the? Was it a? I think it might have been after the Spanish election, and it might have been either a vote in confidence or a vote of confidence, or maybe a vote of confidence in the coalition that had formed. I can't remember. But to do the vote, they literally went round the entire Spanish Parliament chamber, one politician at a time, and the speaker would literally, or whoever was in charge of the session, would literally say every politician's name out loud, and the politician would have to shout back if they were in favour or against. And they had to go around every single, like, hundreds of people to do this vote. I was just like, what is happening here? Why is this like this? It's very interesting to see, though. I can't remember now. It was a few years
Yeah.
ago. I can't remember. Oh right, so Snuff with the knowledge bombs because he interned in Congress for a semester. There you go. So that's where
Yeah. He also
first
brings
hand
up
experience.
I was going to mention this, but then decided it wasn't relevant for the whole like how you vote sort of thing. But there is a very famous incident in Congress in the lead up to the Civil War where one senator in the US Congress took his cane and beat another senator to within an inch of his life. I thought he actually died from his wounds after the fact, but Snuff is saying almost murdered. So I'm not confident enough in my memory to say that he then later succumbed to his wounds 100%.
Oh my
But
goodness.
yeah, it was a terrible incident that gives you an idea for the level of tensions that were at work, leading up to the war that America fought against itself. So,
Right. Um, Not a literal civil war, but at times the Brexit stuff in the UK felt like that in terms of a political sense. It was very much a
I
war
can
on
believe it.
itself. It was a mental couple of years watching all these votes, and then nothing got passed because of just so much indecision. It was ridiculous. It was a
Wow.
crazy time, and I got really into listening to that political commentary at that time, and it's almost exhausted me. Now, several years later, I'm just done. I can't. I'm not listening to a lot of political stuff at the moment. Just the very high level stuff.
Hmm.
All the sort of bickering that's going on in UK politics at the moment. It's like I'm done with it. I can't be bothered with it at the moment. Brexit really tired me out, unfortunately. But it was entertaining. There was a lot going on, and you learn a lot about Parliament procedure and all this sort of thing.
Yep.
It's very archaic. It's very interesting how a lot of things have advanced in terms of UK like language and society and all this stuff, but then Parliament seems like to be this very strange sort of time warp almost. The building really
Yeah,
needs you.
I feel like the more formal you get with those sorts of structures, the less likely it is to change.
Hmm. Well, I have a slight optimistic hope because at some point the House of Commons, the House of Parliament need to get rebuilt at some point because actually there's a huge like fire risk
Ah,
with that building and things. It really needs to be renovated, um,
I see.
and I really hope at some point they just decide no, we're just going to build a brand new Parliament building and maybe move it out of London. That'd be kind of nice, but and they'll just do it like a lot of countries have done, where they build a circular one to make it more collaborative, less combative.
Hmm.
I mean, there is a lot of collaborative stuff in politics, like that. The same video that I was talking about with the whole Labour MP getting told off for breaking the Speaker's eye line and stuff. They talk about in the select committees, and these are very specific committees which are cross-party, and they will
Hmm.
examine certain things that the government is doing, or they'll raise certain issues on a regional level, constituency level, or to do with technology or science or whatever it is, and they'll debate it. And if they need to get the prime minister in to answer questions, they'll get them in and all this sort of thing. And there it's a lot more collaborative. But the problem is we don't see that on TV. We only see the House of Commons where all the ministers are having a go at each other, and the slightly farcical nature of prime minister's questions, which is kind of an interesting thing to watch. But then when you watch some of the old prime minister questions from, say, even 20 years ago, you think, oh my goodness, we have regressed as a country in terms of the language that is used. It's not really. Back then, it used to be a proper debate between the two politicians, not like now, where it's just one of them asks a question to the other, and then the other one completely ignores it and talks about something else, and then all the other
Yeah.
politicians are just upping, their side. They're not really interested in the debate per se. So
Right.
times change.
Yeah. Yes, they do. Let's hope for better things in the future.
Absolutely,
Let's
absolutely.
hope.
Yeah.
But let's not get too far down that rabbit hole.
No, we can
We're
address some questions from.
yeah.
If there's any questions from Twitch chat, feel free to put them in. I got a couple from the Discord, which were added in advance.
Yep.
So we're talking about books and things. So one of the questions we did get asked, I don't know how much, at least I'll be able to contribute to this, but favorite book adaptations.
Yeah, this is an interesting question to me, and I feel like, unfortunately, I don't have a very satisfying response because, in order to truly judge this, right? Because there are famous adaptations of things that I've seen the adaptation, I've seen the movie in most cases, because usually you're talking about book to film, at least in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I agree.
but uh, when I think back to some of the like really good movies that I've seen that I know are based off of something, I haven't read the source material, so I can't really judge. Like, oh, like for example, the Shawshank Redemption is based off of either a short story or a novella, and I love that movie, but I've never read the original, so I can't judge it really as an adaptation. Although I did have a theory going for a while that the best movie adaptations in particular come from short stories rather than full length novels. Because my theory is novels have so much packed into them that you are basically of necessity going to have to be losing information as you do the adaptation. Whereas short stories, I think, are just closer in general to the sorts of things that you can cover in a movie script. And therefore, that gives you more freedom to allow what is there to breathe and potentially bring things to the adaptation that weren't in the original. Um, and I was thinking like Shawshank Redemption is a great movie. It's based on a shorter work. Um, what was another one I was thinking of? I was thinking of this around the time that The Curious Case of Benjamin Button came out. So that unfortunately, like part of the reason this theory is so tenuous to me is I also haven't read The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, but it's another thing, right? It's a movie based off of a shorter work. I think the movie was relatively successful. Um, so as much as I like those though, and as much as I have that little going theory, I don't have a great sense of like I've read this and I've seen this and therefore I've got a fully informed opinion. Most of the adaptations that I've seen that I've been happiest with actually come out of the like manga to anime front. So you're taking like a comic book story, right? It's got art and like speech bubbles and things, and you're translating that into animation. So like essentially like a cartoon where you've got more color because manga is usually black and white. So you're getting the benefit of color, you're getting the benefit of motion, you're getting the benefit of sound, but they can still the two things are close enough together because it's primarily visual in both cases that I think it's easier to make. Not like super easy. I think there are plenty of adaptations of manga, anime adaptations of manga that sort of fall short. But I think it's easy. It's an easier jump to make if you're comparing it to Western novel to Western film. I do have some examples. It's not that I have none, uh, but they're relatively obscure. So the best adaptation I think I've ever seen of, again, it's a short story, to a film adaptation is a work of Russian literature called Heart of a Dog that I watched in college. And I'd never heard of the work before. It's a very short work. As far as like, it's not, you wouldn't consider it a novel, right? I don't know if it's technically like a short story or a novella, but it's relatively short. And they did a movie adaptation, and the movie adaptation feels like it's just everything that was in the book put onto screen as a movie. And I really liked that as an adaptation. I also have fond memories of the adaptation for To Kill a Mockingbird, and that one is like a novel to a film. I do think I give the edge to the book, but I generally do that, so I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. is that classic joke, right? How are you going to know if someone you're seeing a movie and someone has seen the has read the book first? And the answer is, oh, you'll know. Um,
It's funny.
but yeah, and then there's also what was the other one that I was thinking of that was like a more relatable? I'm slipping my mind. So I've talked for a while. Why don't you address some of the things that you want to, Scott Sword?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird because that was one that popped into my head too. Because I mentioned in the last episode that the only classic novel that I read, especially at school, which was not Shakespeare, was The Mayor of Casterbridge by
Hmm.
Thomas Hardy. To make this clear, my class was the only class that read that novel. The other, I don't know, four English classes that were happening simultaneously um, were reading To Kill a Mockingbird. But because I had the one teacher who was a huge fan of Thomas Hardy and that book in particular, she insisted that we read that and not To Kill a Mockingbird. So I haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird, nor have I seen the film. But it's just funny when you mentioned it, I was like, I'm going to mention this, but you got there before me. Um, so yeah, if I was in a different class, then I would have read that instead, and then very possibly in the same English class, I might have ended up watching the film as well. So I can't remember if there's a film adaptation of Thomas Hardy novel. There are others, I think, but no, that one not. The only other one I can think of, from at least from the stuff we did at school, was we we watched the Leonardo DiCaprio adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, which was
Okay.
which was not what I was expecting going in. I thought it was going to be typical as one of these. We read that in class, and then he said, "Oh, let's spend a lunchtime or two watching the film." And I thought it was going to be a more sort of faithful adaptation, or faithful, in terms of the period of the book and everything. No, it's all very, it's got there's like gunfights in it and things, if I remember rightly. And yeah, it caught me off guard. But yeah, again, in terms of a faithful adaptation, I won't comment on it too much. 'Cause it's been quite a few years. But yeah, I've got the same issue where there's a lot of things I've watched as the film, and I've not read the book, or there's
Mm-hmm.
been a huge time period between the two. So the one I can
Hmm.
think of from a children's perspective was there was I don't know if you know it. It's the film is called The Railway Children. Um,
Okay. I don't think I know it.
it's about, I think it's set in Victorian time, but now I might be wrong. I'm going to look it up just in case because I will have to correct myself. But yeah, it's about a group of or a family who have to go from the city off to the countryside because I think the father gets arrested and taken away. So they move out of London, the mother and the three kids, and they end up living near a railway line, and they end up becoming sort of well known in the community in general, but also because of things that happen with the trains. Obviously, because it's about trains, I like that. But there's a 1970 film adaptation, and actually they made a sequel to it relatively recently, which I haven't watched. And the oldest kid in the 1970 version is actually back in the sequel as, I presume, the grandmother character. I don't know. I need to watch it and see. Um, but again, I know I've read the book because I remember having it as a kid, and I've seen the film loads of times. But again, as a faithful adaptation, I can't comment on it because there's too much time has been passed between reading the book in particular and seeing the film. Um, so yeah, I think that's the problem with me. There's very few things I can think of where I've seen two different versions of, or like
Hmm.
two, like an adaptation of a book, or two different versions of the same media. So it's hard then to comment on it, per se. I know this came up in a stream with the Wingspan community where they were talking about these adaptations. There's a lot of detail about it all, which is it was very interesting to listen to. But I can't
Hmm.
possibly comment on it. Same again, we're talking about the Jane Austen adaptations, right? And how in particular, Mrs. Scotswood is a huge fan of, she will have Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice and all these things on repeat. And
Hmm.
she'll be watching one and then suddenly I'll come into the lounge and she's watching a different one. But again, I don't know really well in terms of how, I never really asked her actually, I need to talk to her about this, how faithful they are. I know in particular there's a little bit of hate for, I'm going to get this wrong now. The one with Colin Firth, is that Pride and Prejudice? Yes, that's Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth. Apparently, they didn't. like the adaptation too much with him because it was a bit too long, apparently. But again, that is not my words because again I don't know it exceedingly well.
Yeah, and I'm in like the opposite situation with Jane Austen because I've never seen any of the film or TV adaptations. I've only I've only read the books.
Oh, that well, you know what's next. We've got a question in the chat about Lord of the Rings. Again, I have only seen the films, and I've only seen them very recently in my life. I can't remember where this has been mentioned, maybe on stream or in the podcast, but I'll keep.
Definitely in the podcast. You talked about the train journey where you watched
Oh, that
all
was
of the Lord of the
well,
Rings.
that was actually Star Wars. Star Wars, we did the train
Of
journey.
course, never mind.
That came
Okay.
first, but then later, so it's more recently. Maybe it was 2 Christmases ago. It wasn't the most recent Christmas. It must have been 2 Christmases ago. We ended up watching the the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then I think more recently, my wife on her own watched the Hobbit trilogy. Or at least she watched the first two, and I was kind of there, sort of flitting in and out depending on what I was doing. It came up in my wedding. My best man gave a speech and very kindly dropped the fact in that I hadn't seen Lord of the Rings, and there was a very much an audible gasp, especially from the English understanding section of the audience or of the guests there. They were very
Hmm.
appalled by this fact. So then it got remedied. Um, and again, I've said it. I'll just say it out there. I enjoyed them, but
Hmm.
I really like the first one the best because I like the more sort of
Oh,
journey aspect and
yeah.
the being with the characters and all this sort of thing. I mean, I'm not against the other two films, but I just felt there's a little bit more substance to the first one. It got me intrigued. It wasn't just battles constantly, but that was just me.
I strongly agree. Yeah, I strongly agree. And I was going to say, I remembered there were additional thoughts that I was going to add on in the sense of adaptations because I remembered, first of all, just mentioned this The Godfather, parts one and two. Like those two movies, I think are as good, if not better, than the source material. The Godfather, the book, and I mean the screenplay is by the guy who wrote the book, so might have something to do with it.
That
Uh,
always helps.
but yeah, but there are very few adaptations that I can think of. I can think of one more, Death Note, where I'd be like, no, I think I'd give the adaptation like this one specific. They did. There's been a million adaptations of maybe not a million, a number of adaptations of Death Note, but they did an adaptation of the manga to live action in a series of movies produced in Japan like a long time ago, and they basically rewrote the ending. And I liked the ending that they rewrote for the live action version better than the ending in the manga, but that might be an unorthodox opinion, but The Godfather I think works as far as at least as good as, if not better, than the book material that it was based off of. And the other thing that I would say back on the topic of Lord of the Rings is I completely agree that that first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, is my favorite of that trilogy. I think that's the one where they really nailed it. If you watch like the extended edition in particular of the first Lord of the Rings, that is a like as solid of an adaptation, movie adaptation as I think you could get of that first book. You know, not everything that's in the book is in the movie, but they really get at that idea. Like you're talking about how it's the journey and the characters and all those sorts of things. I really like the way that they captured because one of the things that's unusual about the first book of the Lord of the Rings in particular is the way that it's like a journey from safe haven to safe haven, and each time like the stuff in between is a little bit harrowing and dicey, but you get always get this sense of moving to another place that's safe, that's home, that you then have to leave again. And there is this constant sort of building sense of dread and sorrow for what you have to do, what you have to go forward with, what you have to bear in these like reflective moments in these safe havens. And the first movie, I think, does a great job of like zeroing in on that set of emotions and the tragedies of what could have been. And I think the other two movies are fine. I like them. But the first one in particular, I think, is something special.
Right. And I think that's the thing. Once I'd finished them, I mean, I talked about this before. Like, I enjoyed them, but I wouldn't rush back to watch them. But if you gave me the choice and said, right, you're going to have to watch one of them, I'd pick the first one every time. I think I wouldn't go back to the other two. As much as obviously there's a whole arc that goes through the whole trilogy. Yeah, that was the one that sort of hooked me in a little bit more. And yeah, it was. But I think it was strange watching it not so late in life, because obviously they've been around for like, what was it, like 20, 25 years now since they came out, give or take.
Yeah, at least 25, because the people were joking for a while about the 25th anniversary edition because the director was joking about a super deluxe 25th anniversary edition. So around the time of the 25th anniversary, there were a bunch of jokes going around about that coming out. So that's
How
how I know that.
I'm interested because
No.
obviously you're involved with the sort of the War of the Ring um, board game, and we've also talked about how Fear of Dracula, when we with that special video I put together about why we love Fear of Dracula, and one of the things that came up from people who had read the source material is how closely the Fear of Dracula board game includes elements from the novel, and they really,
Mm-hmm.
whoever designed the game really got, they understood the book. Um, is how well does War of the Ring translate certain events from um, the the Lord of the Rings, the source material, or is it's just a game that it's not designed to do that? How?
So the Lord of the Rings adaptation for War of the Ring, I think, is really well done and really well thought out and put together. I think it is thematically, like the way that that game plays, pretty much entirely in line with the spirit of the Lord of the Rings, the books. And I know there was a little bit of a dust up in the Fury of Dracula Discord about this, where someone came on and was like, "Oh, I think it's terrible. You can't do all these things. You should be able to do this." They had their own ideas about what would make a perfect adaptation. I actually think that thematically, War of the Ring is probably closer than I would call Fury of Dracula. But to be fair, I don't consider myself a great judge of how well of an adaptation like Fury of Dracula is in terms of the themes from the board game versus the book because I haven't read Dracula in years. Right? It's been long enough. I think may have been before we were either in the last podcast or before we were talking on this one about how certain books it's been long enough that I've basically forgotten them. That's how it is with Dracula and me. I remember reading it. I remember really enjoying it and being surprised by how much I enjoyed it. And I remember the epistolary nature of it, but I haven't actually sat down and read Dracula in long enough that I don't feel comfortable saying, "Oh, this is how it is as an adaptation to this board game." But War of the Ring, I can definitely say, works as a great adaptation of the themes of the books, in my opinion. And the way that it has corruption as its own thing that you're constantly trying to deal with, that's tied into the mechanics of the hunt. Uh, Quite frankly, even because War of the Ring is very luck based as a game, and the way that luck, that idea of like providence guiding events, plays such an important role in that game, seems to me very in line with themes from the books, and even back to The Hobbit, where they're talking about like, oh, how fortuitous, right? Like how lucky it is that this should happen, if luck you could call it, right? Because the idea is that the events are sort of being guided by the hand of a god, the like version of God from the Lord of the Rings universe. So I think that there's quite a lot in the, and I actually wrote, maybe if I go back far enough I could find it. I actually wrote like a breakdown of my thoughts on some of the ways that War of the Ring as a board game does a good job of embodying stuff from the Lord of the Rings as the books.
That's good. Yeah, because I just obviously I haven't got experience with War of the Ring, so that's kind of that question popped into my mind. It's like, well, it's either going to be you or Striders in the chat. You're going to both give your 2 cents. I assumed you'd be quite positive about it, but then maybe not, because again, you might still enjoy War of the Ring as this standalone thing, even if
Hmm.
it's not necessarily a good adaptation, because there'll be other aspects of it that you enjoy. But that's great to hear that it takes those aspects of the book really well across. In Fear of Dracula's defense, a little bit, it's meant to be a sequel to the book,
Hmm.
so it's obviously not completely, there'll be certain things. Obviously, again, the way the game changes every time you play it. But just the fact there are there's a comment in chat about it, just about there are certain references to the books, so it feels set in that time period and with the technology that they used in the book and things. So um, it's one of those things where, as I was trying to read through the Dracula novel, and I do want to try and get through at some point, is where I'll see then those references being used, like the wax cylinders, or the Van Helsing's leadership abilities and all these sort of things. Um, it would be cool to spot it in the book and see it in action as it was in the original source material. I think it'll be really neat to see. Um,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm looking back through the chat here, not because we're doing this live. I'm seeing people who say the anime ended on the 25th episode for me. I'm guessing that's a reference back because this was some time ago to when I was talking about Death Note.
I think so.
And if
Yeah.
the event you're referring to is the one that I'm thinking of, there's sort of this shift in the story for Death Note where it starts out as sort of this cat and mouse game between these two characters. And mild spoiler alert for a very old show and manga. There hits a point in the series where all of a sudden that changes, and there's a little bit of a time skip, and then a new cast of characters comes onto the scene. And I think that last part of the original isn't as strong as the first part. And the reason I like the live action adaptation, the old school Japanese live action adaptation, is they find a way to basically make this sort of cat and mouse back and forth between the characters that I find the most compelling end in something of a tie. And I feel like that's just more appropriate for what I loved about that series than the thing that actually got written. So I wanted to follow up on that.
Controversial.
Let's see. Yeah, best live action was Rurouni Kenshin. I haven't seen enough of those. I was in Japan when that first live action adaptation of Rurouni Kenshin came out, and I really liked that first movie. I have not seen the others, so I can't fully comment on that. Has anyone read Dune? I have read Dune. I have read all of the Dune books that Frank Herbert wrote. It's been some time, so I don't necessarily have the best recall, and I have not seen the movie adaptation, so I can't comment on it as an adaptation. Let's see.
I haven't read Dune, so I don't know. Or nor the films either, so I can't comment on that one. What I do want to quickly comment on is an interesting thing talking about adaptations, just because it was something that, again, it was a spontaneous thing that came from one of my classes. So there's in the C1 teaching course, or the C1 syllabus, one of the units, the students that I teach are expected to write a book review, and especially at this stage, they're trying to expand their vocabulary and expand their ability to write about more complex topics and things like that. So once I've gone through all the vocabulary of them and things, I'll often then tell them to do this as a homework task, but I tell them that they don't have to do it about a book. I know there are a lot of, especially nowadays, younger people who don't read as many books, or they do read books, but they're only from a school project perspective. And I was just more interested about them writing about something they're passionate about, because they're more likely to use the the language that I'm teaching them, or try to be a bit more creative. So I always say to them, right, you don't have to do it on a book. You can do it on a book. I think I had some people do it on manga, if I remember right. I can't remember now what it was. I've had some One Piece reviews given to me.
Okay.
It could also be a film or a TV series. I said, I don't care what it is you write about, but it has to be something that you're passionate about, and I want you to do it well. And one of the standout ones I was given, and even though this was like 4 or 5 years ago that the student gave it to me, I just still remember it to this day. And it was a very unique review compared to all the others that I was given. Her chosen media was The Great Gatsby, and she did a very interesting. I have not seen the film nor read the book, but the thing from as a teacher, just reading what she did or what she wrote about, the thing that she wanted to focus on as the point. Because I told them when they're playing the review, you can focus on the characters or the plot, or what you need to think of something that is very much a standout feature of this thing and why you enjoy it so much. So the thing that she really focused on was the adaptation from the book to the film, and especially in particular the costumes and the architecture and the fashion and the style and all this sort of thing. And it just made a really unique experience just for me as a teacher to read something, and it sort of broke the mold a little bit. I do like this task because a lot of the time when they do other tasks like essays and things, they're all answering the same question, so I get the same essay 30 times. But in this case, a lot of them were unique, but this was even more unique because it was focusing on something so specific, and it was something that didn't come up in class. I didn't say you can talk about the difference between the book and the film versions, And it was just something that she just spontaneously came up with, and I still remember it to this day. So it's just because of the topic I wanted to bring that up. It was a really neat thing to focus
That's
on.
really cool.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that interests me in general. All this talk of adaptations, right? Like I do think it's an interesting sort of thing to study, especially because again, I'm a translator and I think there's certain similarities you can see between taking something from one language to another and taking something from one medium to another.
hmm. The one in particular now at the moment is obviously on the. Well, it depends on if you like the series or not. But obviously, they're making the new Harry Potter adaptation for HBO. So you got
Oh, I
obviously.
had no idea.
Oh
That's
my
how
goodness!
out of touch I am with modern culture.
A rook, it's official. You live under a rock, a rook. Holy moly!
I
How
do.
did I
Yep.
mean? There are certain things I understand that might pass you by, but how on earth did that pass you by?
I don't know.
Well, they're
I don't
making
know.
they're making use. So yeah, they've started filming um, the new version. So instead of doing a film series like they've done before for Warner Brothers, now with HBO they're doing a series. So obviously with a TV series, more episodes. The
Yeah.
intention, from what I understand, is they're going to try and make it a more faithful adaptation, which is going to
Hmm.
be for certain things in the books. They're going to be, which have maybe aged not so well. That's going to be interesting, but never mind. We'll see how they address that. But obviously, the thing with
Yeah.
those series of books is the books are very different lengths. The
Yes, they are.
first book in particular is quite short, so are they going to have
Hmm.
to add in more stuff? And then when they get round to, what's the longest is Order of the Phoenix, right? How many episodes are they gonna have to do for that series, for that book? Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I'm not
interesting.
convinced because HBO they do this thing right where they have like we do 10 episodes a season, right? They do these limited series. I'm not convinced that they're going to be like that variable when it comes to episode lengths, right? I just sort of imagine that they're going to stick to whatever formula they have. I could be dead wrong about it, but I don't know. I saw what happened to Game of Thrones, and I feel like Harry Potter will probably tend in the same direction, although they won't be making up their own ending for Harry Potter, so there is that.
Well, that is true. Yeah, the ending is set in stone because at least the series is actually finished, so they won't have to imagine anything.
Yeah.
The other one that I'm it's just 'cause it's in my head at the moment because we've been watching it. I don't know if anybody has been watching Wednesday on Netflix at the moment. As of the time of recording, the second season is out, but they've released it in two halves. So
Hmm.
they've released. I assume it's going to be 4 and 4 episodes. I haven't heard anything different, but yeah, the first 4 episodes have already been released as of the beginning of August, more or less. And then the other half is coming out in September, much to my wife's disappointment, because she just wants to binge it all at once. And I was like, you do remember there was a time where we had to watch, one episode every week. But anyway, um, and
I think it's better for the conversation around a show to have weekly releases as opposed to like throwing it all out there at once, but it is more satisfying to watch it all the way through at once.
right,
So,
right. Again, I can't remember if this was something that we talked about or if this is something that came up in, you know, other conversations I've had with other people. But just the whole idea of like the water cooler talk, right? Or at work
hmm
or at school, you'd all watch the same TV show. So then the
hmm
next day at school or at work or whatever, you all talked about the same thing. Whereas now we can all watch things at different times. Even like something like when Squid Game, the latest season of that came out, we watched it pretty quickly. Well, I watched some of it. My wife watched it very very quickly, but then a lot of my friends haven't watched it yet, or they're still in the middle of it, or they've only just watched it, and it's all through. So there's no sort of simultaneous experience of something.
hmm
Which definitely changes, and there's just so much choice now. That's the thing. Not like back in the old days when we were young,
right,
we were younger
right.
because we're still young. Where there was one.
Different,
Yeah,
totally different culture. Yeah.
absolutely.
Interesting to think how that like that just that method of presentation changes all those different ways that you can engage with something. It's interesting.
But just think about Wednesday because I just made a passing comment and I just said, "Oh, it's really interesting how," because I've seen obviously I've seen the Wednesday series and also I've seen the 1990s films because there were
Hmm
two of them that they made in the 90s because my wife is a fan of them and she's watched them with me. And I just said because obviously in the films Gomez, right? The father. I don't know if you know the Adams family
Hmm.
very well. He's very tall.
Not very well, but I have seen them. I am familiar with the Adams family. But
Uh,
yeah.
so the father, like the mother is like, yep, spot on. Like that is a really good look-alike. But with the
Hmm.
father, because in the films he's very tall and quite
Hmm.
slender, relatively slender, whereas in the TV show, he is much shorter
Hmm.
than Morticia, the mother, and he's very very stout.
Hmm.
And I just made a passing comment going, "Oh, he doesn't really look like Gomez from the film." And then my wife said, "Oh," she just made a passing comment and said, "Oh, I think in the original versions he was stout and very short. It was actually the film adaptation that made him look very different." I was like, "Huh."
Ah.
But just because obviously my first exposure to the Addams Family was the film, because obviously I've not seen the original comic strips or any of the other adaptations that have been done, because I know there've been quite a few. That
Hmm.
was the image of Gomez that I had in my mind, was this very tall, slender but also imposing kind of figure. Um,
Hmm.
and I think in the films he's quite. I'm trying to think of the word. He's quite sort of main character energy a little bit, whereas the mother is a little bit more subdued. Whereas in the TV show, because of the way the focus has been done, there's a lot more about the mother-daughter relationship, which is good. Don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
the father is very sort of, as my wife would say, happy flower. He's not main character energy at all. He's very much he plays second fiddle to
I
Morticia,
see.
the wife, and it's just so different from the film adaptation. I'm just like, oh my goodness, right? But because of the first thing I saw was the film, so that's the
Hmm.
impression in my mind of what it's like the same with cover songs. There's been quite a lot of
Hmm.
songs which I've listened to as covers first. So then when I go back to the original song, I might not like it so much. Or when I listen to an album from a certain band, because that's the first album I've heard from them, that's the
Hmm.
impression of the sound I have in my mind. It takes a lot to then break that, especially when I go backwards into their discography. If I go
Yeah.
forwards,
I
or
was
if I'm involving with them, not so much. When you go backwards, you're just like, oh, it can be quite a leap sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna make that leap myself, right? Not the one that you're talking. Just the jump from like having the image of one Adams family in your head, comparing that to another adaptation to cover songs. Like because that is immediately where my mind went. I was just like, oh yeah, it's like you hear the original song and then you hear the cover and you're like, that's weird. And there have been cases in my life where like I don't know what the original song is. I hear some famous band's version of a cover song and then I go back and listen to the original and I'm often like, oh well, clearly the cover did it better. Because again, it's not necessarily which one came first; it's which one you heard first a lot of the time. But it's not. There are exceptions. It's not a hard and fast rule. But I think you're right in that you have to do a certain amount of work to approach each one of those things as its own thing and not be fighting against like the image or the sound that you have of it in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's now kind of making me want to go and just source out some of those original cartoon pages
Hmm.
of the Adams Family, just to have a look at them and see how they've changed and how because some of the other characters like Fester and I said Morticia, it's like yeah, okay, that's very obvious. It's there's a great similarity there with the other media. Again, it also depends on then the person who's directing what they're inspired by as well. Do they go back
Yeah.
a lot to the source? That always feels that, especially with TV shows and things. We've had it with like The Witcher and things in recent times. As soon as someone says, "Oh yeah, we're not so fussed about the source material," that for me is a huge red flag. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
I'm not interested in consuming this if you're not. But then a lot of then things I might have watched without realizing that it's an adaptation. And then I go back and realize afterwards, oh, they've had to trim a lot of stuff, or they've really changed a particular plot line, or whatever. It just depends on how you're exposed to the media. Um,
Yep.
I think I've got one more sort of book related thing, and then maybe for the last little bit we can do sort of quick fire questions with the audience. I've got some quick fire questions written down, but also if anybody's got quick fire questions, you can pump them in. As one of the other follow up questions we had in the Discord, which was books to share with your kids. Obviously, a very much a relevant topic for me.
Yes.
Obviously, as of the time of recording, fatherhood is still imminent. That is the word that I'm using. And it sounds a little bit
Good
menacing,
word.
but it's not. But by the time this podcast comes out on YouTube and on Spotify, I will be a dad. There is no way that won't be the case, just based on timing. And I've always said this. One of the things I'm most looking forward to is reading books with her once she gets a bit older. Obviously, don't worry. I'm not gonna be sitting down with her at 2 months old and reading War and Peace with her and stuff, something like that. But no, obviously, it's something that I really want to do. Um, uh,
Actually, 2 years old, you could probably get away with War and Peace because anything you read to your kid at that age is just going to get passed over their understanding, as far as I'm concerned. So you just have a nice memory reading a book more for yourself and the sound of your voice to your child, and then, they're not going to remember you reading War and Peace to them,
well, that's true. That's true. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think of things. A lot of it would just be rediscovering stuff that I read as a kid. So again, another one that I didn't mention before, but one of my again, I don't have a conscious memory of reading the book with my mum, but then I've got very vague memories of reading it myself. Was again a series that is probably common in every country, so it's not a UK specific thing, even though it was written from the UK. It was the Thomas the Tank Engine series, obviously
Ah,
very
yes.
very famous because of the TV show, obviously. But I've got the early collection of the books, but it's illustrated. And it's well preserved, and I've got it, and it's like yeah, it's still in good condition. I didn't tear it apart as a kid. Not that I didn't read tear apart books and stuff, so a lot of my books are still in very good condition. So that's something that to sort of remember that, so to speak. I want to read that. But a lot of the things also too, what we talked about last time. There's a lot of books that I haven't read. Things like we talking about Roald Dahl, for example, right? There's a lot of Roald Dahl
Yeah.
stuff I haven't I don't think I've seen some of the film adaptations like Matilda and James and the Giant Peach and things, but I've got no I've never read those books. So that'd be an excuse to be like, right, as a kid for some reason I didn't end up reading those books. This might be an opportunity to sort of reconnect with that media potentially. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know actually from the Spanish and Catalan side. I'm not sure actually how my wife's going to approach that. But it might be an excuse for me to sort of learn Spanish. We'll learn Spanish together. Um, but she'll laugh at my accent, no doubt. But I was actually really interested. There's a comment in the chat which is Le Petit Points, which is really funny because that's now a thing that I didn't know about at all um, until very recently, and now I'm hearing about it everywhere. Because I think we've been given as a gift from one of my wife's family members the Catalan version of um, that book, and so yeah, I don't know anything about it. I've never read the English version, but yeah, it looks like that's definitely going to be something. Um,
I've only read the English version, but it struck a chord with me. I think it's famous for a reason.
hmm. Okay, well then again, that'll be one. It's somehow same with a lot of films as well, right? They've just passed me by, so this might be an
Mhm.
opportunity for them to sort of reconnect with that media. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if she becomes an avid reader or not. But then that might encourage me to read more. If she sees
Mhm.
me reading, then she might as she gets older. Hopefully, she'll get inspired by that and she'll read too.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's definitely something that I'm really very looking forward to. It's something that I want to do with her a lot. There's a lot of love for the Pretty Pods in the chat. The Little Prince. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to go and suss that out. But
Yeah.
apart from
I
that, I
don't
can't think of
really
any.
have a great answer for this question just because I don't have kids, don't plan on having kids. I could, change the subject a little bit to like book I'm most excited to share with my nieces or my nephew because that's sort of how I expect to pass things on to the next generation. But my general sort of approach has been kind of like how I was talking, like my family was very supportive of me reading, but they didn't necessarily um, have books that they wanted me to read that they would like put in front of me or anything. And I find myself in sort of a similar position where it's sort of like I feel like if my nieces or my nephew end up getting really into reading, I think it would be interesting to then have a conversation with them and try to encourage them to read things that I might have liked if I think that they would like it, right? I would want to be guided to some extent by what they're interested in.
Hmm.
Uh, but I don't really I don't really know like regardless of their like interests, what I would say that I would want them to read, especially because it's a little bit of a different question, right? Because my nieces, for instance, are at the point where they're in like middle and high school or going into middle and high school. And my nephew is like 2 years old, less than 2 years old. So very different life stages for those. Um, but yeah, so I don't, as a result, necessarily have a great recommendation. I will say that recently, one of my nieces has been very into theater and theatrical productions and was very excited to get to the point where she would soon be reading Shakespeare. And so I was thinking, oh, if you're going to be reading Shakespeare, I hope you like Hamlet. That would be the thing that I would say, right? Because you've expressed an interest in that. I've read all of Shakespeare actually because I went through the complete works when I was living in Japan. But uh, I think if I was going to pick just one play to be like, all right, um, you're in high school, here's Shakespeare for you, I would pick Hamlet. But that's just me.
That's interesting. Hamlet's actually one I haven't read of Shakespeare. At school, I'm trying to remember now the list. We did Midsummer Night's Dream. Got very little memory of that. Um, Merchant of Venice, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and Othello. They were the five that I read. So I've never read Hamlet. That's one that again passed me by. A school ruined
Interesting.
Shakespeare. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I had that experience as well. I just not the best presentation of Shakespeare in school. And to be fair, I do think it's harder because not only is it like language, it's written for people from a different time, and so you have that gap to cross, which is difficult to cross because it doesn't seem particularly relevant to your life in high school. But often they're just being presented as texts where
right.
they're really meant to be performed like as a theatrical production.
Hmm.
It's really the best way to experience them. And I don't think there are a lot of schools that really put that front and center. I can't remember if this was high school or college. I did go to a very interesting play presentation as some sort of school assignment. I think it must have been college to go see a production of King Lear where they deliberately set it back in this like ancient Olmec civilization. And I don't I don't know enough about that culture to say like how much it like lined up with the presentation of King Lear, but it was a fascinating presentation of that play to the point that I can still remember it to this day. Um, but yeah, Hamlet was one that like I just read in because I was doing this thing where anytime I was in English class, I would read the assigned reading like way ahead of when we were supposed to have it read. So I would read it for myself and then we'd go and we'd do it in class and then we'd take it apart that way. And so that was my way of being like a lot of the time I felt like my English classes were like drawing out things and doing things with the material that I wasn't connecting with. But if I could read it on my own, I'd form a better connection
Hmm.
and then eventually appreciate the alternative interpretations and things that we'd get in the English class more. And for the most part, that turned out to be true. And I think it definitely worked with Hamlet. And then the other thing I would say is like, I appreciated Shakespeare so much more when I was reading him living in Japan as someone in his like mid 20s than I ever could have as a teenager.
Yeah.
Just certain things about those plays and their presentation, it's just like themes, these like themes from life, like I just appreciate better as an older person.
It's kind of what we talked about last podcast, right? About how music, you might discover a song in one period of your life and it doesn't connect with you, it doesn't hit you, but then wait until a different time and it will. Same thing here, right? It's just you need to be in the right moment to be able to appreciate something one way or the other.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. Um, yeah, again, it's just it's so fixed as part of the British school curriculum. It's so much Shakespeare. Again, I made the comment before, right? How my wife was perplexed when we first met, and she was so excited to talk to me about Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell and Jane Austen, all these authors that she really liked, and I was like, I haven't read any of those. We just read Shakespeare and nothing else. So
Wow.
yeah, it's apart from obviously there was I said To Kill a Mockingbird, and then when we did Mayor of Casterbridge, that was pretty much it. So yeah, real. I mean, it was more. We had a little bit more variety in terms of the poems that we read. We had we'd have the year was always split into thirds. We had the Shakespeare third, more or less, the poem third, and then the novel third, which would be whatever. Um, and we had a little bit more variety because obviously poems you can study in a much shorter space of time. So we did have a greater sort of
Right.
variety of the ones I can think of were from Wilfred Owen. One's about wartime. Funny enough, going back onto that topic. Which again, as an adult, I actually want to read them again and sort of again see
Hmm.
how. Because at the time though, I still felt that was a lot more impressive to me than a novel. Maybe because again, it's kind of not the same. It's like a little bit like song lyrics.
Hmm.
They pack quite a punch because they've got to do it in a very short number. You know, the word count is short for a reason. You need to really get your
Right.
point across.
Hmm.
Um, looking at Twitch, we've got 47 seconds until an ad. So how about if we just
Uh-oh.
take a 5 minute break? We can go off and get some drink. Everyone in the chat can hydrate and all that, and we can come back and we can spend a little bit of time with some more sort of quick fire questions. How does that sound?
Works for me.
Cool. All right. Well, people on Twitch, we'll see you in 5 minutes or so, and people who are listening to this after the fact, you're going to hear us again instantly. All right, we're back from our wee break. Ready for some quick fire questions. I've got some written down, but if people in the Twitch chat want to post them, feel free. There was one that was posted just before the break. I just want to get the correct wording. Oh yeah, best best song cover ever. That's a bit of a tough one. Best is very hard to qualify. We can maybe say best or favorite because best again is going to be very subjective depending on who you speak to. Um, is there any particular that stand out? I've got a definite answer. Just at least one. As soon as I saw it, it was the first one that popped into my head. I don't know about you if you've got any.
Oh, I'm just scrambling to think of any songs that I know that are covers now that I've been put on the spot. I don't know. This is the trouble, right? As much as I like music, I don't have a very like broad, expansive experience to draw on. So, why don't you give your answer and I'll try and compose my thoughts so I have at least something to say in the meantime.
Well, the one that instantly popped into my head, and it might just be a very easy cop out answer. But the cover of "The Sound of Silence," the original song was by Simon Garfunkel, and the cover was done by Disturbed, a more modern American rock band. And we talked about them before on the podcast because of my "down with the sickness" joke, which I do all the time, and everyone groans at it. I just keep doing it. So I don't know. That must be now getting a little bit not old, but it's probably older than I think. I'm
Oh, I
guessing
think I
10
think
years
it's
old.
probably yeah, I think it's probably fairly old at this point. Because now that you mention it, I think my mom, who was a, huge Simon and Garfunkel fan, actually liked that cover.
Hey,
So,
10 years old. Look at that.
yeah, nailed it.
Um, and again, like that band is used to on pretty much, I think on almost every album they have a cover version. I know there's one of their older albums they had a Genesis cover on. Um, but yeah, it was a it really sort of revitalized the popularity of that song in particular. But just the cover on its own, I think it really stands up. And yeah, they stay true to the original, but also they make it their own. It's not that's the issue with covers. It can be really tricky. And again, I don't know where I fall on in terms of what line. Do you try to really imitate the original? Do you really try to change it up? Because the problem is if you change up too much, then it might get more backlash because of it. Um, but I think they made it their own, but they didn't make it this really intense, you know, high octane metal song or anything. They kept it as a ballad and they stayed true to that sense, but there is definitely a slightly different vibe with it. I also really like it too because there's a live version of it where Miles Kennedy from Alter Bridge joins and they do a duet. But Miles Kennedy doesn't sing enough in that song. He's too intimidating. He's too humble. That guy needs to show off his ability more.
Mhm.
So there's that one, and then hmm.
Oh, I thought of one. The
Oh,
Hallelujah cover that you sent me.
oh, of course, yeah, because you've got there was so many different versions of that song, right?
Yes.
I guess we're talking about the Jeff Buckley.
Yes, Jeff Buckley from your Desert Island Discs.
Yes, yeah. Because obviously it was George Cohen who wrote. Again, that's one I haven't heard the original, so that's another one where
I
I've
think
been.
it's Leonard Cohen.
Oh, Leonard Cohen, that makes sense. Or was George Cohen somebody else? Probably. Um, Leonard Cohen, you are right. Yeah. So again, that's another one where I've been shaped. I've heard the Jeff Buckley version, and it'd be quite it'd be interesting to go and listen to the original. But it's really interesting. I'm just on the Wikipedia page for that right now, and it's very interesting. There is an audio snippet from the Leonard Cohen version, and directly underneath it, there's an excerpt from the Jeff Buckley version. So you can see how influential that cover version was.
Yep. Yeah, I
Um,
believe it.
good choice. Good one. Yeah. Um,
I was just thinking of any cover I could think of. Actually, the first place my mind went was the interview, and I discarded it because I haven't actually listened to a whole song. But having heard a snippet of the Mark Tremonti singing Frank Sinatra thing on Rick
oh,
Beato's channel, he is a really, really good Frank Sinatra cover person.
yeah, yeah, and that's one you don't expect from him either, because when that came out, everyone was like, "Wait, that's Mark Tremonti, right?" Because he's so known as being like that metal guy, and also when you hear him in interviews, um, for a long time he was very self-conscious about his singing ability. There's a lot of singing he doesn't like doing because it's not in his range.
Hmm.
Whereas Miles Kennedy's like Mark Tremonti is just baritone, whereas Miles Kennedy has a much wider vocal range, so he can do a lot of stuff. And there's been times when they've written ultra like I can talk about this one with you. You remember Waters Rising from the Fortress album?
Yes.
Um, that was written originally for Miles, but then because of limited studio time or whatever, then they end up that Mark would sing it, but then they had to
Hmm.
basically, I think they had to take the whole pitch of the song down to make it fit with his range, and they had to,
Right.
in terms of the construction of the instrumentation side, they had to change some things to make it fit with his range because it was just too high for him otherwise. But it was really interesting how Frank Sinatra is the one singer that he, as a influence. Whereas with Miles Kennedy, he would say, "Oh, you got Stevie Wonder, and then you got Jeff Buckley and Chris Whitley and all these other people." Mark Tremonti isn't really inspired in terms of a direct influence by many singers. The only one is Sinatra, which is
Hmm.
very interesting. But yeah, his Sinatra is just, oh my god, spot on, and that made me really want to go back and listen to Sinatra stuff. Hearing that, if people haven't heard the Mark Tremonti sings Sinatra, very much recommend it. I'll post it in the Discord. It's very, very good. Good choice. Good choice indeed. Um, Oh, we got a question in the chat about, don't you have a thing about Stevie Ray Vaughan over Eric Clapton? Of course, yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan obviously does a lot of covers because he did some Jimi Hendrix covers. I don't know if he does any covers of, or did, I guess, because he's not alive anymore, unfortunately. He did Stevie Ray Vaughan did Jimi Hendrix covers, which I really rate. The fact he's able to take that blend of blues standard and very much inspired from the likes of Clapton and the Albert King and these sort of players, but then mix in that sort of rock edge of someone like Jimi Hendrix into his playing. But yeah, I've got very strong opinions over here. I don't dispute how important Eric Clapton is from like a music history perspective. But when I watch him play live, technically very good. I'm not disputing that at all. But I don't feel anything. Whereas Stevie Ray Vaughan, I remember the first time I saw him play live on a DVD, my jaw was on the floor. I was just amazed.
Hmm.
I just was so moved by him. So yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, and yeah, I will take him over Clapton all day long, um, especially in a live setting, especially. So um, we've got a comment here about "Come Together" by Aerosmith. I don't know that song. I assume you mean that's a. I assume Casey, that's a cover version of the Beatles song, but I didn't know Aerosmith had done a cover of "Come Together." That's interesting. I'm gonna have to listen to that after recording this. I don't know that cover version. I know the original really well because I've listened to it quite a lot. Because I am quite a Beatles fan as well. So, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna listen to that one. I don't. Do you have anything to weigh in on the Stevie Ray Vaughan / Eric Clapton conversation?
Nothing at all.
Very good. Well, there's another comment in the chat saying don't get him started, so I'll just leave it as that. um, Another question. Oh, different topic. What's one thing you wish more people knew about your culture? I assume you mean our
Ooh,
home culture, so Britain, US.
yeah.
Ooh, I think I know what my answer would be because I've had this conversation in Spanish class recently. So I'll take this first if
Yeah.
you want a little bit of thinking time. Um,
Hmm.
from an international perspective, it really pisses me off when people say that British food isn't good. Um,
Oh, okay.
I appreciate where it's coming from certain staple meals that you would find, especially in like 1980s and stuff, the whole just mince and potatoes on a, as the standard meal that a lot of people ate at that time because of, economic situation and stuff. And then internationally, it hasn't got the same fame as Italian food would, also then American food. Because of as we talked about before, American culture is very invasive in that sense. Also, even
Yeah.
or nowadays, like Japanese food is very popular now in Europe, and Chinese food and
Hmm.
Indian food. Um, but there's a lot of really good traditional British cooking. But it's just not known internationally. And yes, okay, if you think about it from a quality of life perspective, the amount of produce that is native to the UK is obviously not the same as a Mediterranean diet. I'm not sitting here going, UK diet is superior to the Mediterranean diet. I'm not saying that. But I just don't like this blanket statement of, oh, British food is terrible. Because there's a lot of really good British food and a lot of good dishes. That's the thing. It's about the combination more than the individual ingredients. Whereas maybe in Mediterranean diets, the individual ingredients shine a bit more. But you know what I mean? I mean, there's another sort of follow up question about food you miss from the food that we miss being abroad.
Hmm.
Seriously, like, as much as there's a lot of stuff I don't miss about the UK. Give me shepherd's pie, give me a roast dinner. I would be in heaven. Fish pie, I would just be. I very much miss that. Oh look, there's a shepherd's pie comment in the chat. They know what I'm talking about. The Brits in the chat.
Perfect.
So yeah, I think that's one of those things which really annoys me. There's just this stereotype that British food is not great when it is. It's just when you look at other factors that we talked about before, like health and obesity and all this sort of thing, there is a food issue in the UK with ultra processed food and stuff. But there are a lot of good dishes out there, and the eating culture is very good, and we have got good ingredients. You just need to go and find them a little bit, and obviously it's not. You're not going to walk down, the center of I don't know Madrid and find a British restaurant. It's not going to be
Right.
right. It's not. It's not going to be the same. So that's my answer. I don't know about you. What about you about America?
I'm trying to think. It's really tough for me because we've exported so much of our culture that I feel like there's a lot of America abroad already. Um, I guess if there's one thing, because I've been thinking about this for a little while, and if I had to say something just on the spot here, and I this came through a little bit in that accent video that I sent you, it would be to understand that America has just a very broad range of cultures within it, right? It's not just a monolith. And this is actually something I wish Americans here in this country could appreciate a little bit more because I feel like it's very easy to get swept up in this is what we are nationally and lose focus on this is what we are locally. And I feel like there's a lot of local character in the United States that either gets discounted or forgotten.
Hmm.
So that's something that I would say, and particularly as a nation whose history involves lots of people coming from different places, and sometimes that's ugly, and sometimes that's uh, nice. Uh, More often ugly than nice, but still, in the modern day, right? There is this wealth of this variety of these different cultures that are now here, and I feel like they don't all necessarily get the appreciation that they deserve. And I say this is evident to some extent in that like US accents video that I sent you, where it feels like there's like stereotypical American accents, but when you actually get down on the ground and you get those like actual clips from people and you're listening to things, you can get this wide variety of accents that you would never really think of as one of the stereotypical ones. And I think that's something that should be more widely known. And like I say, probably even within the US as well as outside of it.
Hmm. I wonder how much of that is influenced also just by the geographic size of the US compared to
Yeah.
European countries where you've got a lot of regional diversity, but because the country is so small, relatively speaking,
Hmm.
you can discover these cultural differences more easily, especially nowadays where people can travel so easily. Um, but then also the cultures get more
Yeah.
homogenized, which is another topic that we kind of mentioned in passing a little bit before.
Hmm.
Hmm. No, it's yeah. I think that's sort of the thing. Like you mentioned, like the same with the British history, right? There's so much of that history that is not at all pleasant. But especially now in the modern day, we need to hopefully be able to acknowledge the uglier aspects of that, but then also try and look at the positive aspects that then those different people groups can bring in terms of cultural diversity and also then food and all this sort of thing, right? Why is Indian food
Absolutely.
so popular in the UK? It's probably the most famous cuisine type in the UK because it got brought over in in by the bucket load,
Hmm.
and it's just something that's so easily found, and we really like it and embrace it. So that's kind of yeah, you need to embrace the positive aspects of all these different groups of people, as well as acknowledging
Absolutely.
the uglier sides.
Hmm.
I haven't seen any new questions in the chat. If they do pop up, I'll see them. One I've got written down because we have talked about music quite a lot, but I don't think we've talked
Hmm.
about this first live concert.
Ah, yes. For me, that would have been Bela Fleck and the Flecktones.
I wondered if
So
that was going to be the
I,
case.
yeah, no, I am very shy and don't like to go out into large venues with lots of people. So I had never even considered going to see a band in concert. It sounded like a terrible time to me. It still seems like a terrible time to me when I can just, put it on and listen to great music in my living room. But the nature of the like sort of improvisational aspect of the Flecktones and the fact that they were my favorite band and the fact that some of the venues that they were playing, the one that I am thinking of right now is one that was called The Egg. It was very sort of a sit down sort of place. And so you would go and it wasn't necessarily like raucous crowds that I would feel out of my element at. It was, you go and you sort of appreciate this like you would, I don't know, maybe like a concert piece or something. It made me feel more comfortable just going and having that experience in person. So, yeah, that's probably the only real, aside from like, you go to a restaurant, they've got live music.
Mm,
Like if I'm gonna like seek out live music by, and again, this is also sort of cordoning off, right? Classical productions that you would go see in school or something. This is I want to go see my favorite band in a live concert setting. I went to go see the Flecktones several times, and I think that's the only band I ever went to go see live.
ah. I'm gonna try and when the new Alter Bridge tour kicks off, I'll be nudging the tour dates. Are you like go? We'll see if we can change your
Good
mind on
luck.
that.
Good luck. I don't know. I just have the impression that I don't think I'd have the best time at a live Alter Bridge concert, but maybe.
um, I mean, I think that there's a very funny comment in the chat. I don't know if that was because of our previous topic about cultures. I don't know if that got any feedback. I think more just you saying that you don't like to be in large groups of people, and there's suddenly all these preaches and valid comments in the chat. I'm the same. I'm very much the same. But I think when you go to, especially like a rock concert or something, you are very much going. You're part of this collective group. You are part of this crowd, but at the same time,
Hmm.
you don't have to interact with everybody. You're part of this shared experience, but you can just focus on the music that's happening in front of you. There's some uh, the one awkward time in concert was when I've seen Shinedown live more recently, and before one of their more high octane songs, the singer Brent Smith has told the audience to basically shake hands and say hello to everybody to the left and right of them, and just like social anxiety has just gone high to the
Wow.
max. That's not what I'm here for. But it's still
Yeah.
nice because again, everyone's kind of there for the same reasons, right? And everyone's nice. Um, so yeah, I feel you're part of a collective. I don't feel like I don't have the anxiety of, oh my god, I'm going to a huge space with lots of people and I'm having to interact with them. I'm not. I'm just part of this huge collective group who are focusing on the same thing that's on the stage. Like say when you go to like to the cinema, I know it's not quite the same
Hmm.
thing, but it's like you're not interacting with everybody else who's watching the film. You're just part of the shared
Right.
experience of watching it. That's kind of the way to think about it. Um, that's something I'm really looking forward to. I haven't been to a live gig in ages in terms of like a rock gig. And I had a period of
Hmm.
time between sort of 2016 and 2020 because of the way I was studying and stuff. I had a lot of free, I could organize my time how I wanted, so I went to quite a lot of gigs. And I haven't been to a lot of gigs recently, especially with working. My schedule for, or my timetable for work has been a little bit limiting instead of that. So I've booked it already. I'm going to see Alter Bridge in February, and I am just already so damn hyped for it. So yeah, my first live gig was actually Shinedown in Edinburgh, and it was on Halloween night of 2012.
Oh
So it's
wow.
very, very, I always remember that date. We all went out, and yeah, fairly small venue in Edinburgh, which is now not a concert venue. I think it's a pub now, if I remember rightly. I think it was called the HMV Picture House. I think that was the right name. And
Hmm.
yeah, my first live gig, and it was very enjoyable because I was so like obsessed with Shinedown. And then it was a long time before I went to my second one. I went to see Slash's solo band with Miles Kennedy singing in Hamburg in Germany, and that must have been 2015. Yeah, 2015. And then once I went to that gig, I went multiple gigs every year. I wasn't going like every week or anything, but when a lot of my favorite bands were passing through town, I would go and see them. So yeah, I've seen big, arena style concerts. I've been to Murrayfield, which is the rugby stadium in Edinburgh. We saw Foo Fighters there. That's the biggest gig attendance wise I've been to. I've also been to a little bar in Edinburgh that had maybe, I don't know, 200 people, maybe even not even that. So yeah, I've kind of seen the spectrum of it. So
Wow.
yeah, I want to see rock and metal live again. It's just, yeah, I need it. But yeah, what people in people in chat don't like it because of all the touching of that's like a thing you just have to accept. If you're gonna especially be in the standing area, you're gonna end up touching other people. Um, so that's just something I just accept and get on with. The last couple of times I've seen Alter Bridge live, I've actually been sitting, just because I've been with other people. So
Hmm.
Paul, I don't think Mrs. Scotsall would be too keen on being in the standing area. So when the topic
Well, I don't
came,
blame her. Neither would I.
so the
Forget that.
so when the topic came up for the February one, I did say, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go alone because I just need to stand and I need to be at the front. That's the experience I
Hmm.
want this time. As much as I enjoyed it the other times going with her and that. It's quite funny. She seems to want to go with me. It's like, you do realize I've been to gigs on my own before. It's quite funny.
Hmm.
um, Tickets are insanely expensive. Yeah, I've noticed that the ticket prices have gone up quite a bit. Because when I saw the price of this ticket I bought, I was like, "Gee whiz, that is really expensive." That didn't seem that expensive when I bought it, even 3 years ago. I don't know what's happening to all the prices. It's insane. Um,
Wow.
just depending on where you go, often seating is often going to be maybe a bit cheaper than standing because you're going to be further away. And depending on what venue
Hmm.
you're at, you might not have big screens up to project the members of the band on stage. So yeah, it just depends on what arena you're in. But the arena I'm going to see them in Barcelona is actually quite small, so it's still quite intimate, rather than some of the
Hmm.
other bigger arenas I've seen them in. So yeah, it's going to be good. I'm really looking forward to it. Um, so yeah, I wasn't
Awesome.
surprised when you said there's the fleck tones. I was like, yeah, I could have predicted that from a mile
Hmm.
away. But it's good to know, just in case, because there might have been something else that came up.
Yep.
Oh, that was a comment. That was a thing that came up in the Discord, actually. I don't know if you commented on it. We had a question come up in stream a few days ago, which was, do you? I can't remember if I've asked you this before. Do your dreams have sound? Do you have conversations in your dreams? Do you have sounds or background sound or music in your dreams?
So I rarely remember my dreams, but when I can, they definitely have sound. And actually, the strangest dream I've ever had was when I was watching so much subtitled anime and studying so much Japanese that I had a dream in subtitles.
Oh, oh, that's new.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't in it. It was like I was watching a show, because again, I've been watching a lot of shows, and there was this witch out in the woods, and she had an apprentice, and the witch was raising her apprentice to do something. It's been years. I only remember this in the vague detail that I do because it was such a weird experience that I've told this story about like the strangest dream I've ever had before. So, this witch and her apprentice out in the woods talking to each other, and they were speaking in one thing that my brain said was Japanese, and I was reading what I interpreted as English subtitles to understand them.
Hmm.
So I can't vouch for the fact that any of it was actually Japanese and English, right? That's just it's a dream. But that was like the weirdest dream I've ever had, where it was just like, yeah, I woke up the next day, I was like, I think I've been watching too much anime.
But just to be clear, the thing that you were dreaming about, was it actually a show you'd watch, or is it something that you made up?
No, it was completely made up.
Okay, interesting. Okay, they had the subtitles. That's awesome. I've not had
Yeah.
that. There's some comments in the chat about dreaming in other languages. I've dreamt in. I dream with noise. I don't know if all my dreams have conversation, but yeah, the ones I remember definitely have conversation. That's kind of the reason why this topic came up was I remember asking in class and things, and a lot of my students would be like, "No, our dreams are silent." I was like, "Wait, what? Am I the weird one? Am I the one that doesn't have? I'm the one that has, voices and stuff in my dreams. Am I the strange one?" And I asked it in the Discord, and the overwhelming majority of people who voted said that their dreams have sound. So I was like, oh, good. I'm not the odd one out here. Um, but I've dreamt in Spanish before. I think I've had two dreams in Spanish that I can remember. Don't know if what I was saying was accurate, but I was speaking in Spanish. I definitely wasn't speaking in English, or I was hearing stuff in Spanish at least. And then I've had two dreams in which I had music playing. I can't remember what the second one was, but the first one was a perfect sort of rendition in my mind of the song "Pay No Mind" from Alter Bridge from the Walk the Sky album.
Ah, yes.
And I can very
Hmm.
distinctly remember the bridge section as well, and then waking up and just going, yeah. And it wasn't as if I was listening to the song as ambient noise, and it bled into the dream. I was not listening to anything at that time. So yeah,
Wow.
that was purely my brain thought of that on its own. So I was very happy when that happened. It was a very
Yeah,
very enjoyable dream. Can't remember what the rest of the dream was about, but there was definitely "Pay No Mind" was in there, especially the bridge because it's very distinctive. So yeah.
that's pretty cool. I
Um,
don't think I've ever dreamed with music. Yeah, but like I said, I usually don't remember my dreams.
there's a comment in chat saying "I don't dream" or "I don't remember my dreams?" Question mark. Surely it must be the latter, because isn't I thought dreaming was just something that almost everybody does, but then whether you remember them or not, I think is a different matter.
That's
Um,
my understanding as well. My understanding from, my college psychology class 101 that I took many years ago now, is that everybody dreams. It's just that not everybody remembers them,
hmm,
which is why I phrase it the way that I do when I talk about it, which is I'm sure that I dream, I just never remember them.
right. And I always,
Or
oh,
very rarely.
I've also heard all this time about lucid dreaming, but then I don't know if what the dreams I've had have been particularly lucid. I guess they haven't been. Or is lucid dreaming
So
more technique?
lucid dreaming as I understand it is a dream that you can sort of interact with, where you have this sense that you're dreaming, or if not, that at least you have some semblance of control over what's going to happen, and you can shape the way that your dream goes.
Hmm. Okay.
And I think it might also be connected. Again, this is hazy memories from a long time ago, but I think it might also be connected with people who like do dream journals, who like they feel like when they're dreaming, they can basically feel themselves in their dreams and like take very careful note of everything that happens.
Hmm. I don't know. Yeah, because I've seen comments in chat. I don't know when I dream. I don't think I know that I'm dreaming. It feels real, but at the same time, I'm not a bystander. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
I am reacting to things that happen inside the dream, and it feels like certain things might be in my control or outside of my control. But I don't think it's not ever been in the dream. It's not like Inception where I'd be like, "Is this a dream? Am I dreaming right now?" It's not. It's not like that.
Uh,
Um, yeah, I think there's comments in
yeah,
the chat maybe about how deep your sleep is.
yeah.
That could also
From
be a
what I
thing.
remember, from what I remember, this is correct. There's REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, right? So it's like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, REM, stage 4. And you like cycle through them in different amounts throughout the course of the night, different lengths in different sleep stages. And as you get older, this changes. And the rapid eye movement stage is the stage in which you're dreaming.
Okay. The one thing I do know, like I might mention this again on the podcast, I don't know if anybody here can relate to this, but I have the same fever dream. I haven't had it for a long time, but I think I had it recently when I had a fever, where I'm not naturally claustrophobic, but when I have a fever, I have a very specific dream, which makes me feel extremely claustrophobic. And it might involve being in a room and I feel the walls are closing in, but they might not be. But it's the sense I'm getting. But in real life, I don't have. I'm not a naturally claustrophobic person. When I'm working, I need a lot of space. I don't like being closed in. But I can get into a lift and I'm not. I'm not scared about it or anything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anybody else is in the same boat. I've only met one other person who has fever dreams, and it's such that it's the same dream or the same type of dream every single time.
Hmm.
Um, um, so yeah, it was very. I remember it was very scary the first time I had it because then when I woke up, I thought the dream was continuing in the room.
Oh,
So that was very
yeah,
strange. And being a kid, it was
yeah.
very strange. Um,
I had one dream that this is another one that I was really young when I had this dream where I dreamed that I was being tortured and was tied to a chair. And I was so convinced that it was real. The way that I woke up was I finally burst free of the chair. And when I, quote unquote, burst free of the chair was when I sat up in bed, smacked my head on whatever the uh piece over me was. I think it was the top board of the bed had like a part that jutted out, and I smacked my
oh
head
my
right
god.
against it, and I was just like, what's going on? I was still in this weird state where I wasn't sure what was real and what was dream. And so I wasn't sure if this was part of the torture, and the fact that I hit my head just made it that much worse. And I was like, "What's going on?"
Oh
I needed
no.
a few minutes to like catch my bearings. That was
Oh
crazy.
goodness. I've had like the falling dream, and then when I've woken up, I still feel like I'm falling. So then my instinct is then to push my arms out to try and grab stuff, so I
Hmm.
stop myself from falling. And I've knocked stuff off my bedside table. I haven't had that dream in quite a while actually. That was more when I was a kid or a teenager. I had that dream. I haven't had it. I don't think I've had it since I've left home. Maybe I have. I don't remember. But yeah, I often have very distinctive dreams when I have afternoon naps because maybe I fall into deep sleep more
Hmm.
easy, and I often will wake up very soon after having the dream rather than having a longer period of time. Um,
Yeah,
s-
that's sort of like the key to whether or not you'll remember is how soon after you have the dreams that you wake up.
um, so yeah, and it's just they can be very strange. My dreams are very weird a lot of the time. They don't make a huge amount of sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that's most people.
well, yeah, true. Oh dear, we've got comments in the chat. Nightmares are always about drowning. Now that one I've not had.
Oh,
I've had the falling
that's
one,
scary.
but yeah,
Yeah, I've
that's
also had falling dreams, but I haven't
oof.
had drowning.
No, that sounds horrific.
Yeah.
And we've also got another comment saying that this person doesn't shut their eyes when they sleep, so
Oh,
when
wow.
so they wake up with dry eyes. Oh, you poor thing. That doesn't sound fun at all. Oh
Oh,
dear. I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, at least you're closing them partly. If you sleep with your eyes open, that must be very strange, especially if you end up like, right? If it's somebody who's not your family sees you like for the first time, like a partner or something, they would be like, "What is going on here?" Do we have any
can only imagine.
Do we have any sleepwalkers in the chat? I used to sleepwalk a little bit when I was younger, but I haven't done it in a long, 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 long time. Whatever it was, I've grown out of it. I think.
Yeah, well, I think that's to do with, right, because, and I think this might also tie in with my like idea of being tied down, because I think it's the REM stage where you're dreaming. Your brain puts out this hormone or something that like locks up your body so you don't move. And a lot of the reasons that kids will sleepwalk and then grow out of it is because they're spending more time in like stage 4 sleep where you can dream, but your body isn't locked in place. So they end up getting around and like walking around because they're no longer they don't have that like control happening to them. And I think that's why I was like, on the verge of waking up. I'm trying to move and I can't move is because of that same effect, right? My body not being actually able to move. And then when I came out of it, suddenly I could move and I moved too much, right?
Right. But also, then when you sleepwalk, you're gonna have your eyes open, but you're fast asleep. I presume. I've had a couple of
I don't
times.
know if you have your eyes open.
Well,
That much I don't know. I do know that you walk around and you're fast asleep, but
because
go ahead.
I've had it where I as a kid I lived in a house which had 2 floors. So I ended up
Hmm.
one time when I was sleepwalking because I've got no memory of this. And I was of an age where I would remember if this was the case.
Hmm.
I I was sleepwalking, and I went upstairs, and my mum saw me in the doorway. I was asleep, but my eyes were wide open apparently because it seemed like I was awake.
Hmm.
But then she must have realized pretty quickly that I was asleep in some way. And then there's another time when we were on holiday, and I must have I for some reason I put like the chain across the door as well as locking the hotel door. I put the chain across. Probably because I was like, huh, we've got a door which has a chain, because obviously as a kid you don't have that in your house, right? So I was like, let's put the chain across. And then
Hmm.
I remember waking up in the middle of the night trying to unlock the chain.
Oh wow.
So I was clearly wanted to go for a walk through the hotel in the middle of the night. Um, but my mum stopped me, and she must have thought I was still sleepwalking, and she was like being very like extremely calm because you don't want to frighten the person who's sleepwalking. She's like, okay, let's go back to bed really slowly. And I remember then
Wow.
saying in the morning, oh, I remember waking up, but I was right by the door, and I was like, why am I holding onto the chain of the door?
Wow.
So yeah, they're the only 2 times I know of that I've slept. And I think since I've left, I mean, when I lived alone at uni, I might have slept walked. It never put if I did, I was never ended up in a compromising position. I always made it back to bed because I never woke up randomly on the floor or something. Um, I never made it into the street. I was wandering
Hmm.
around the centre of Edinburgh in my pajamas. So I don't think I've done it since I've been an adult. Um,
Yeah.
I've got a little bit more sort of like insomnia esque symptoms. That's something that's different. As a kid, I slept perfectly. If I woke up
Hmm.
once in the middle of the night, that was a bad night for me. I would sleep all the way
Hmm.
through, no issue. Whereas now, I kind of struggle to sleep all the way through.
Hmm.
Damn you,
Oh,
technology!
we are getting confirmation, by the way. You have your eyes open when you're sleepwalking. Interesting.
Ooh, yeah, it would scare the shit. It's almost like a horror movie. where you just see them with that sort of blank expression, just staring. Because obviously, you probably wouldn't blink either, would you?
Probably not.
Um, so yeah.
Oh, that is scary. Faint a lot and never remember.
Yeah. That's something that definitely has to get checked. um,
Yeah. There was one time I was in elementary school, and this is the dumbest bet that I ever accepted
oh no.
because
Oh no.
someone bet me that I could not turn my face purple, and I was like, "I'll show you."
Wait, what?
So, yeah. I mean, if this sounds like a crazy, stupid thing, it was a crazy, stupid thing. It was a dumb thing I did as a kid. Uh, and I was like, I can turn my face purple, just you watch. And so I held my breath and I did this thing where I like tried to, I don't know how to describe it even. I tried to sort of violently shake my head back and forth without moving it very much, almost like a shutter or something, in order to really encourage my like the blood to rush to like my cheeks and my face, and so I could feel my face starting to get hot. And I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna do it!" And then the next thing, I woke up in the nurse's office. Is the next memory that I have. I don't actually remember passing out, but I made myself pass out. I
Right.
woke up in the nurse's office and they were like, "Are you okay? What were you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, they bet me I couldn't turn my face purple."
Oh dear. And then you were lectured on why you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, no, there was one brief memory before I went to the nurse's office. I remember because it was super weird. I had a very strange angle looking up at the metal leg of a chair that was reflective. So I remember seeing the distorted reflection from the metal leg of the chair, and then I was in the nurse's office.
oh no. Don't do that. It's like you remind me of the whole thing about, again, this is something that I didn't know growing up, but it's only now I've seen it. I saw it first in a film, but apparently it's something that some kids do is when they get angry with their parent or whatever, their response is, "Oh, I'm not going to breathe." And
Wow.
they hold their breath for as long as possible and they refuse to breathe. Um and yeah, and then they end up potentially passing out because they just obviously they don't breathe for a certain period of time. And the minute they faint, then the breathing aspect kicks in, right? Because they're not purposely
Yeah.
holding it. But I'm just like, is this a thing that kids do? I didn't know this was a thing or not. So maybe people in the chat could tell me if you did that as a kid, did you to try and punish your parents or whatever? You told them, I'm not going to breathe, then you hold your breath.
Wow.
I do that all
That's
the
not like, despite the similar story I just told, that's not anything I did.
no. I thought that was where you were going when you said that. I was like, "Are you gonna hold your breath? Is that what you did?" But no, it was not.
Yep. That's sort of that's part of what I did, but yeah.
Oh,
That was
there's
not a good idea.
somebody in the chat saying they did it all the time, but they'd think that they would die from it.
Wow. I
Fortunately,
did remember one time when I woke up and it was the like I used to get sinus infections like constantly. And the first time it happened to me, I didn't know what was going on. And so I woke up and I was so like stuffed up that I couldn't breathe. And
hmm.
so I woke up and I couldn't breathe. And I was terrified. And when you're terrified, I found it like that made it that much harder to breathe. So I thought I was dying.
Right.
That was
Oh,
a very scary moment for me when I was a kid. And, my parents are like rushing in because they could hear me just like gasping. And I'm just like, I can't breathe.
oh
Oh,
no.
man. Terrifying.
Well, that
But I eventually got to the point where, like, okay, I know what's happening now. I'm not freaking myself out. I'm not like hyperventilating. I'm not, yeah. But man, that was scary.
or that moment when you start choking for a certain reason. You swallow a bit of food and it's not
Hmm.
crushed up enough, and you feel it getting stuck in your throat. It's like that's it. I'm gonna die now.
Yep.
Bye bye world. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then eventually goes. Oh,
Yep.
it goes down. Okay, it's fine. I've only fainted. We'll talk about the fainting topic here. I've only fainted when I've been ill. I've, as far as I'm aware, I've never fainted for any other. I've never like randomly fainted, quote unquote. I know obviously randomly fainting is there is some sort of underlying illness, I presume, in that case. But I don't faint at the sight of. Also, like I know a lot of people are sensitive to maybe like the sight of blood and these sort of things, and they'll faint.
Hmm.
I've only fainted a couple of times when I've been once because I was ill. I was on a school trip, unfortunately, and there was like a virus going around the school, um, and yeah, I got it really bad on like the penultimate day. And then we had to travel back home, and obviously that's the worst thing to do when you're sick. Is then told you have to get onto a coach, and then you have to get onto a flight, and you
Hmm.
have to get all this sort of stuff. And I almost collapsed in Munich airport, and
Wow.
the teacher who we had a couple of teachers with, and one of which is actually a friend, with a dad of a friend of mine. So we knew each other on a personal level as well as being a teacher student relationship. But it's very funny because he tells this story quite a bit when we visit him sometimes. And yeah, he thought I was listening to music and I was like headbanging to the music, and then he suddenly
Oh,
realised,
wow.
oh no, he's fainting, catch him before he faints, kind of thing. But
Wow.
fortunately, I woke up very quickly, and then they basically forced food into me to try and get my energy levels up. And then the only other time I've kind of collapsed slash fainted, it's such a stupid thing as well. Where my wife and I were doing like a touristy thing round in Edinburgh called Camera Obscura, as a place
Hmm.
of optical illusions and things. And there's actually a camera obscura at the top, and you can see it with like the reflecting mirrors and things. Anyway, as we were leaving, I very stupidly left my thumb in, not purposely, let me make this clear. I left my thumb in the door frame as the door shut. I just accidentally left my hand hanging there, and the door shut on my hand.
Ooh.
And I think it was just, even though I wasn't hurt, like physically speaking, it was a little bit sore, obviously. But I think it's just the shock of it happening just must
Mm.
have just sent so much stuff going through my body. Then I was just, they asked me, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I was just nursing my hand, going, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I took like 2 steps forward, and I collapsed.
Oh
I think
no.
they managed because again I didn't hit on the ground. I think they managed to catch the two people I was with, my wife and her friend. They managed to catch me. It was just so weird because then then there was like, "We need to take you back home." I was like, "No, no, I'm fine."
Yeah.
But then about
Yeah, they're gonna believe you after you just fainted on them. Yeah.
but then about an hour
Wow.
later, I got probably the most intense headache of my life. So there's definitely some sort of like negative reaction to it. So maybe my pain threshold is just extremely low. I don't know, but yeah, there's the only times I can think of where I've collapsed, quote unquote. I've seen a thing in the chat where you stand up too quickly. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
I get that sometimes.
Hmm.
Where you get a little bit you get very bit you don't I don't faint or collapse properly, but you get a little bit disorientated. You're like, well, just sort yourself out, brain. Get yourself
Yeah.
organized. And it's like, okay, right, I'm fine. Now I can carry on. Um, I haven't had that in a while, actually. Come to think of it, I haven't had it recently.
Yeah. That's occasionally happened to me as well. Yeah.
Have you ever had the thing where you get like these? They look like almost like black or blue splotches in your vision.
Yes. Yes, I have.
What
Yep.
is that? That is such a
I have no idea.
strange.
It's very odd. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that. Again, I haven't had it for a very, 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 very long time. But as a kid, I remember having them in the bath, weirdly. But I don't think it has anything to do with it. But you see like these blue and black sort of splotches appearing when I was looking at the bath. I'm like, what is that?
Mm.
But
Yeah, I used to have, maybe I still have, I don't know, because it's intermittent. This thing would happen to me. It happens, used to happen on like 2 year intervals, but since it's become even less regular, it's this thing that would happen to me where all of a sudden my face would just flush, feel really hot. I would be really disoriented and be sort of unable to stand. And uh, trying to think of, like, I would get that vision thing going on where I would see spots, and I would never, it would always feel like I was about to pass out, but I would never actually pass out. And I'd wait maybe 5, 10 minutes, and then I'd be fine. It would be like nothing happened.
hmm,
So it felt like my body was just pushing itself for some reason that I could never determine, like right up to the brink of something and then coming back down, and I don't know why. And I would go to the doctor like after experiencing these symptoms, and the doctor would be like, "Okay, well, you're fine now, and there's nothing we can tell you about what's going on that will explain this. So we don't know what's happening to you."
off you go back into the real world.
Yeah. It's like if we catch you having one of these attacks, right? Maybe we can do something about it.
Hmm,
But it was never a situation where there was any doctors nearby. So
hmm. It must be. Is it? Could it be like some sort of like panic attack or like just something very stress related at that moment?
the only thing I can think of is it might have been related to me like not eating regularly enough, because
Hmm.
that was something I had an issue with when I was a student, and this mostly happened when I was a student. But it also happened in situations where that wasn't an issue. Like I was out having food with a friend at one time, and it happened. And so I have no idea if that actually makes sense as a trigger or not.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Don't know. That's not something I can relate to. I don't think I've had that. Um, the other thing I've had is when I push myself too much, I often end up making myself sick. Again, not deliberately.
Mm.
If I had like a
Hmm.
really stressful day, then I end up then being sick. Again, it hasn't happened very often, fortunately. Um, but yeah, strange just how the body reacts to certain things, and it might be so
Yeah,
individual
it's
you
very
can't explain
strange.
it. Hmm.
Yeah.
The chat is just blowing up with all fainting slash falling asleep stories and the like. So yeah, we can we'll take the topic somewhere else and we'll see if anyone's got any follow up questions. What was I gonna? Ooh, again, I don't think well, I mentioned it just now, just partly because of uh, the question that was in the chat about the what things about your culture would you like other people to know about? So I talked about food, right? So one of the questions that was in the Discord was food that you missed or miss when you were abroad. So I remember in particular at the
Mm-hmm.
time we've had food conversations. I've said my piece, things like shepherd's pie and roast dinner and stuff, because you try to recreate it over here and it's not quite the same. Also, anything really with bacon, because Spanish bacon is not the same as the
Right.
Danish style bacon that is very common in the UK. So yeah, even like like a English breakfast, I can't recreate properly, or like I
Mm-hmm.
miss HP sauce or something like that. And I remember when we talked about it in a previous podcast when you went to Japan, because obviously you discovered a lot of fish and things, and that your diet improved that way. Was there any food that I don't think we talked about that. Is there any food that you missed in the opposite direction? You were sitting in Japan going, "Oh, I could really do with some of that American grub." Was there anything in particular that you
Yes.
missed?
Yes. And I think we have talked about this on the podcast before, but it was a long time ago. Um, this was sort of tied into a lesson that I took away from my time in Japan of like it's best to just sort of accept that you aren't going to be able to recreate certain things because I was always trying to get the things that I couldn't have, especially because it seemed like I should be able to get them. Like I should be able to get like an American style hamburger or an American style just a cheese pizza, right? Because Japanese pizzas, as we've spent a decent portion of at least an episode on, very different than the sorts of pizzas that you get in the States. And I would try and recreate like just a straight American style cheese pizza in Japan, and every single time I was just disappointed. And that was probably the biggest one for me was I couldn't get pizza, but there was also this one place that I would go to that served waffles, and their idea of presenting waffles is to give you just these little like actually very well made squares of like Belgian waffle style waffles and they would top it with a berry sauce, maybe a little bit of ice cream, and some maybe depending on what you like which combination you were ordering maybe you could get it with maple syrup but they would only ever put like the tiniest little drizzle of maple syrup on like the side of the waffle and I'm just like that is not how you serve waffles, Japan. And so I remember I actually bought a container of maple syrup from a store to bring into this place so that when I ordered the waffles that came with syrup, I could just pour more syrup on top. And the owner of the store, because this was a relatively small local shop that I liked quite a bit, besides this quirk with the not enough syrup on the waffles. The owner of the store came out and was like, "Oh, uh, you have your own maple syrup. Can I like taste it?" Because he was thinking like the grade of maple syrup that he was producing wasn't right, and I didn't have the heart to tell him. I was like, "No, your maple syrup is fine. You just don't give me enough of it."
It's a quantity issue, not a quality issue, my guy.
Right, but it was really funny because he would like did this thing where he like poured some out onto his hand, and then like licked it off of his hand to be like, "Hmm, yes," and you could tell he was doing this like official type taste. He was like, "This has much more body, right, than the other maple syrup," and I'm just like, "Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, that's the body is the issue."
um, and the other thing I miss, I mean, I can get it over here, but it's Spain's tea game is very weak. So obviously at home, I've had it now. I've had some Twinings Earl Grey while we've been recording this podcast. But it's so
Nice.
it's so annoying when I go out. And 'cause I do like having a tea when I'm out. I'm just like, oh, damn it, I can't ask for a black tea because I'm going to be disappointed every time because they're not going to give me a
Hmm.
brand that I like. It's going to be I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but the brand that they serve in a lot of like cafes here, it's a British brand, but I've never seen it being sold in the UK. So I think we talked about it before.
Hmm.
It's like I believe is an export only brand. Probably wrong, but
Yep.
that's the sense I'm getting from it, and it's
Hmm.
awful. I don't like it at all. Maybe I'm a bit of a snub or a bit prudish with my tea, but I like Twinings, and that's the taste I like. So deal with it. Um, so yeah, and there's only one cafe that I know in my general area that will give me a good Earl Grey tea. Because again, Earl Grey is
Hmm.
very hard to find, and always they just
Yeah.
call it black tea. I'm just like, oh no. As soon as it says black tea, I'm like, nope. This really concerns me because it has to be something. It has to be Earl Grey or English breakfast or whatever or oolong or
Right.
whatever it is. Don't. If it says black tea, I'm very concerned by it. Um,
Right.
and yeah, it just disappoints me every time, and I just never learn my lesson. So I'm always going out and having chamomile tea and things, because yeah, I just the tea experience in cafes just depresses me every single time, and
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
it's
that
not
was
good.
sort of my experience, except in reverse, because I learned to drink tea in Japan,
Oh, that's
and then I
right.
came to the
Yeah.
States, and it was like none of these tea companies does tea right. Uh, and I was like, what was all this like added sugar? Like, what's all this nonsense? And then I found this brand that was like, hey, we don't add sugar. And I drank that brand, and it was the harshest, like, cheapest blend of tea that they could have possibly put together. And I was like, now I know why all the other brands use sugar.
But wait, why is that? Wait, why is there added sugar into tea? I'm very confused. Is the tea like pre-made? I'm very confused by this. Why is there?
Yeah, it's all pre-made. It's all pre like store-bought pre-made stuff. Now, if you were going to a restaurant or cafe, they'd give you like a tea bag, right? And then it would all be at your control. But I tried to go to the grocery store because that's what I would do in Japan, right? I just go to the grocery store and buy some pre-made tea, or go to a vending machine and buy some pre-made tea and enjoy it. And it was only when I couldn't recreate that pre-made experience here that I was like, okay, I got to do this myself. And I started looking up loose leaf tea, and that's how I got big into that. And ironically, I've since found like Japanese stores that are based in my area that have some of the brands of tea that I would just drink off the shelf in Japan. So now, if I want, I could go out and buy some of this tea. But at this point, it's like, well, I've got all this loose leaf, and this is even better.
I'm still confused by the concept of pre-prepared tea. I'm just so confused because it has to be heated. I can't. This concept
Well,
just seems
it
so strange to me.
has to be either heated or chilled. They have both. If you go to a vending machine in Japan, you can order from a row and it'll be like this stuff is hot, and you can order from another row, it'll be like this stuff is cold, and you can get whatever you want.
I'm just still so bamboozled by this because there are tea vending machines, quote unquote, in the UK, but
Hmm.
it's not pre-prepared. You have to put the cup, you put the tea bag in, and it just pours out hot water. It's not
Hmm.
pre-prepared.
Yeah.
If it's like cold tea, like iced tea, then that's a different thing.
Hmm.
I'm so confused. I don't understand. It's like the whole Spanish thing about, oh, let's make tea in a glass. No, no, stop giving me in glass, like glass glasses or glass cups. You don't drink
Hmm.
tea in glass stuff. It has to be, porcelain or ceramic or whatever. Don't give me that stuff. Oh man, it drives me nuts. There's a lot of people in the chat saying they don't like sugar in tea. I have my tea black. I'm not sweet tooth generally, so I don't have sugar, and also I don't
Hmm.
like the taste of residual milk in a water-based thing. I know there's
Hmm.
water in milk, don't start chat, but I wouldn't like the taste of milk and tea together, so I have my tea black always.
Yeah, I have tea and coffee black all the time. Uh, this is funny because there is someone who came onto the JET program while I was still in Japan, who gave me the most like visceral reaction I've ever had to someone's like food preferences. And they were like, "Yeah, so I was in this restaurant and I ordered like Japanese green tea, and it was like hot tea that they had made at the restaurant, and they brought it out to her, and she was like, I asked for sugar and they wouldn't bring it." And I was just like, "But that's wrong. It's a good thing they didn't bring it to you. Why would you want to add sugar to green tea? That's so gross."
No, I definitely no, it's
Uh,
only black tea. Yeah,
and
green.
it's funny to me that
Oh.
like because I have always been sort of an advocate of being able to do what you want as long as you're not like hurting anybody, or like really causing offense, right? And so like all of my experience up to that point was being like, yeah, why should they control your food preferences? And she was like, I ordered this green tea and they wouldn't bring me sugar to put into it. I was just like, good.
Suddenly switching sides.
Yeah. I do think, right, like the rational part of my brain was able to like talk me down from it, but it was the the
Just
visceral reaction of like, "Oh, why would you do that?" that like really hit me first.
right. I think the comment you made about like customers, right? You know, whatever your preferences are, you go with it within reason. I think there's
Yeah.
certain limitations. Like, no, that's just wrong. That's not a preference. That's
Yeah.
just wrong.
Hmm.
So yeah, I get that. Um, it's always funny because again, uh, my mum is the same. She's always had coffee black. Because it's like this ritual every time we go to like if we go to a cafe or something, um, and they'd bring the coffee and they'd bring the little saucer of milk and then they put it down and then my mum would instantly just pick it up and put it back on the waiter's tray and say, "You can take that back." Don't need this. Just this ritual every time, especially when you've told them black coffee, black tea, then they bring
Hmm.
this little bit of milk. And you're just like, really? I clearly
Hmm.
said black tea for a reason. Um, Again, I don't think over here. I don't think they would instantly bring milk because again, the tea culture is not very strong. I don't know if Spanish people would realize that you should have tea with milk or without milk, depending on how you like it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, and the thing that this is a pet peeve of mine, drives me nuts in cafes when they don't make the tea for you. If they put it in a pot of tea, that's different. But a lot of the time they don't do that because they don't understand pots of tea here. But when they give
Hmm.
you the hot cup, the cup with hot water in it, with a saucer over the top to keep the heat in, not necessary, people. You don't need to keep the heat in that long, but whatever. And then I'm sitting there for 5 minutes. I'm like, right, is my tea ready? I lift up the saucer, and then you see there's no tea inside because they've left it in a packet next to
Oh
you.
no.
I just like, what? How hard is it to open up the packet and put the tea bag in for me? Seriously, and like
I
especially,
will say,
oh
I
man,
will
it drives me
say,
nuts.
I have had one experience where, because it's similar here when you order tea from a cafe, they'll open the packet and put the tea in for you. But there was one time that I went to this place where they brought it out and it was clear that whoever made the tea um, made it like, 10, 15 minutes ago. And so they brought it out to me, and I waited another 5 minutes thinking this tea needs to steep. And so by the time I started drinking it, it had clearly been much too long and it was very harsh. And I was just like, oops. There is one cafe that I went to where, I mean, tea is their thing, right? It's Harney and Sons. I think I've mentioned this brand before.
Yeah.
They source tea from all over the world. They have a local shop in my area, and so I've been to their cafe once. And what they do is they actually, when they bring out the tea, they have a timer with it to show you how long it's been steeping. So you can
Ah,
steep it exactly to your preference.
right. I think the thing because I like the stronger flavor, so I would always prefer oversteeped tea to understeeped tea.
Hmm.
I have met some people who just instantly just dip the tea bag in and then a few seconds later they take it out. I'm just like, hello,
Hmm.
that's nothing. It's like it's barely touched the water. You're not gonna have any tea flavor there. That just and then they add milk on top. Like, what are you doing?
Mm.
Leave that tea bag in and enjoy it. Yeah. Um, that's it. So yeah, I will always leave it longer than necessary. Um, I do find though I've got a bit of a problem because a lot of Spanish people have a little bit of coffee after lunch, but the coffees they serve here because they're very intense, they're almost like espresso type. They're
Mm.
cortados. They're very small cups of coffee. But because of that, they can
Hmm.
drink them very fast. And there's this really awkward tension where everybody at the table has drunk their coffee really quickly, and they look over at me and my tea is still steeping. I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry about that. I'll be here for another 20 minutes,
Wow.
drinking my tea very
That's funny.
calmly. And there's a question in chat: is all tea made with tea bags? I guess it depends on where you're saying there. I don't know where there is. In terms of Spain, I think I've seen loose leaf tea, but you have to go to a specialist shop. If you go to a supermarket, if there is any British tea, it will be tea bags. In the UK, though, there's quite a lot of shops that will sell loose leaf tea. Um, that is, yeah, I wouldn't say it's the most
Yeah.
popular thing. Most people just stick with the tea bags. It's very easy. You don't have to measure out anything and worry about, oh, do I use the leaves once or twice and all this sort of thing. You just put the tea in with a tea bag and that will do the job. But there's definitely a culture of people using loose leaf tea, especially if it's a little bit more sort of artisan. I had a friend in a board game group who'd come along with different types of green tea, which I can't remember the names of them
Mm.
now, but they were very specialist. But they came in these like
Mm-hmm.
almost like a drug. They came in like these tiny little packets, and you had to measure them out
Mm-hmm.
and all this sort of thing. Um, so yeah, I'd say tea bags are definitely the default. But there is definitely a certain percentage of the population and a culture of using loose leaf tea. I've got some loose leaf
Yeah.
tea here which I want to try out, but just sometimes when you're on the go, it's just a bit of a. If I only want one cup, it's a bit of a faff to do the loose leaf. But I do prefer the taste of loose leaf. It's not as
Mm-hmm.
consistent as a tea bag, but if you get the quantities right, once you've sort of balanced and you work out what the correct quantity is, it tastes so much better, in my opinion. That's
Oh
just
yeah.
me.
Yeah. The default in the States is definitely tea bags or ready made. And Japan, I always got ready made. I feel like that's pretty standard, particularly just iced, essentially cold green tea. Very standard for them to just have in vending machines, convenience stores, all this other thing. But you can get tea bags and loose leaf, and you can get in the States similarly tea bags, well, which are also one of the defaults, but you can also get loose leaf. And that's what I do. I primarily drink loose leaf these days.
Mm. I keep seeing the the loose leaf teapot that I've got in the kitchen. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh damn, I should have some loose leaf tea. And it's just it just
Mm.
requires a little bit of extra effort, but yeah, I do enjoy the taste a lot more. Um, I'm seeing that there are people off to bed in the chat, so we can look to wrap up unless there's a flurry of questions that come in. One topic I did have, again, I don't know if we've mentioned this, but again, it's very possible we've talked about a lot of stuff over the last few months. It's very possible that we have, well, it's more than a year now since we've been doing this together. Um,
Yeah.
a place you'd like to visit, but in your case, that is not Japan. If there's another country that you'd really like to go and visit, where would it be?
Oh, well, this one's easy for me. Scotland.
Yay! Converted. Now, how much of that opinion has formed since talking to me, and how much of that was there before, before all this?
100% talking to you.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Excellent. I should rework for the Scottish Tourism Board. I've encouraged a lot of people to go to Scotland.
Yeah, I got to get those connections. Earn a little ambassador money.
Absolutely. Would you be going? Because obviously, there's two very sort of different types of people who go to Scotland. They just go to do the classic sort of let's go and see Edinburgh, let's go and see the city type of thing, and then you get other people who very much do the sort of tour around the whole country and they see the islands and they see the north and the highlands and that maybe visit a distillery or two. But then you've also got then I guess then a third group who go more from the hiking adventure sort of experience of it all? Because I know obviously you've done a lot of walking in Japan and things. Is there a particular focus if you're going to go to see Scotland, or there be a particular thing that you'd focus on more than the rest?
Well, it would depend a little bit on the circumstances under which I was going, like how much time I could spare from work, how much money I'd have available for the trip, and all that. If I was just to plan something out based purely off of my own inclinations, I would try to do a lot, right? I would try to go to as many places as I could. I think a strong focus would be on hiking. I want to get out and experience the abundance of nature. I would also want to see major sites in cities and cultural areas, museums, and things. Um, and like you're talking about, just really get as much of the experience of the country as I can. Right? I tend to be a little bit of a completionist, so I would, if I had, if time and money were no objects, I would try and do something of everything. But if I had to like really limit it down to what I think a more realistic trip might be, I might, base myself in a major city and then try and go out from there for some hikes or something like that. So,
Right. I think that's the advantage. There's a couple of places in Scotland which would be very good bases. I mean, um, Inverness, as much as because I'm from that area, and
mhm.
it's obviously now when you look at it, it's a very small town. It's only like 50,000 population, so it's like, oh, there's not much to do there. But if you're a tourist, as a base, it's perfect. because you can go off in all
Right.
different directions. You can easily go across to like the island, like Isle of Skye, in like 2 hours, or maybe a bit
Mm.
less. You go east into Strathspey and see all of the distilleries. You can go slightly south and you see the Cairngorm Mountains and that, and go across down Loch Ness, Fort William, all these sort of things. So as a base, it's perfect. And even Edinburgh is a pretty good base because there are some day trips or 2 or 3 day trips that you can do from Edinburgh. They'll do a trip through the Highlands and then come back down. You can go into sort of the borders area of Scotland. Even Edinburgh alone as a city, there's so much going on as well. And
Mm-hmm.
on that direct rail line, so if you were there for a long time, you could suddenly go, oh, we could take a day out and go south from Edinburgh to Durham or to York or something, or take a weekend, go down to London, then go back up again. So in that sense, it's quite well connected. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of options there, and so there's a lot of places gone I haven't visited just because of just where there's a lot of the islands I haven't seen just because
Mm-hmm.
as a family we didn't go. We've been to a couple. We've been to Skye, I've been to Uist and that, but I haven't been to Stornoway, haven't been to Mull, and all these sort of places. Yeah, there's a lot of places to experience. There's actually one of the community members right now who's on holiday in Scotland, and they were posting things and they were saying the names of these places, and I was like, I think you've mixed it up for this name. I said, there's a place called Gairloch, and they wrote it
Mm-hmm.
as Gare space Loch, and I was like, it should be Gair and all's one word, and then they were like, nope, it's definitely spelled this way. So I looked it up, and I stand corrected. There's a Gairloch that's spelled the way that they wrote it. It's a place I've never known before, and it's near Loch Lomond and all this. So yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's a lot of places that I don't know about. Yeah, there's a lot of parts of Scotland that I don't know. And then in England, there's so many places I don't know. But England's a bit bigger, so it's harder to see. I've seen everything, but oh, that's exciting. Well, that's good. I'm glad that's the case. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I should really then
Where
return.
would you go?
I should return the favor and say I'd come to Connecticut. I mean,
Well, you don't feel obligated on my regard.
here's the thing, right? I would love to come to the States at some point, but I would be very much interested in the natural side of things. I'd want to go, and
Mm.
even though I'm not a big hiker or anything, I'd be interested in going around parts of like the Appalachians and stuff and see the more countryside aspect of America. Or even I've seen like from pictures and also playing American Truck Simulator and things, the Washington State. I do mean Washington State in the West, not
Yes.
DC. All that
Yeah, I
area
get
in
it. Yeah.
Idaho it looks stunning. And then the border into Canada and the Great Lakes and everything. That would be something that would be interesting to me because obviously it's such a huge country. There's the diverse landscapes. It'd be very interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
But I am in no way rushing to go and see New York City. I would just be not. I'm not interested in it at all. All these big population
Mm-hmm.
centers. I'm not interested. Um, I'm trying to think where else. I think I've said it before that I've been to New Zealand once, and I want to go back again and do it as a proper holiday and investigate places. Closer to home, there's just so many. There's so many places in Europe I want to go. I mean, instinctively, I'm thinking Italy. Um, Again, this is going to raise my social anxiety a bit, but I would love to go and get away from the touristy traps again and almost do like a rustic sort of, again, countryside tour of Italy and go and
Mm-hmm.
eat the traditional cuisine from certain areas and talk to the local people, which again, that makes me very anxious to do. But I think it'd be a very
Yeah.
cool thing to get away and sort of almost like what with Spain, right? You can connect with the local produce and things. I just really want to go up
Yeah.
also to Scandinavia as well. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
fascination to go. I mean, partly because of the music, but also just because the landscapes just look insanely, just amazing. So yeah, there's just too many places. That's the problem. Not enough time, not enough money. But you never know. Hopefully, in a
Yep.
lifetime, we can see at least some of these things.
Yeah, for sure. Quite a
Um,
long list for you then.
Yeah, I couldn't limit it to just one. That's the problem. It's too many,
Yeah.
too many. I guess that's the
Yeah.
other
At
thing too.
least.
As a family, it'd be interesting to see how we, at least for the next few years, um,
Mm,
a foreign holiday, unless it's going back to see family in the UK, would be quite unlikely. But that means we might be able to explore
right.
Spain a bit more. That's something else I really actually want
Mm-hmm.
to do. I just want to investigate. There's so many parts of Spain I haven't been to.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been to Galicia yet. and with the Celtic roots there. I've been to San Sebastian, but I haven't seen the rest of the Basque Country. I haven't been to the south. I haven't been to Valencia. I know there's so many places I want to go and see because the food is incredible everywhere, especially in the north, because the landscape is more Atlantic. So
Hmm.
I'd feel a little bit more at home, like Scotland, but there's better food. So win-win. Um,
Perfect.
I'm trying to think. We might have
Yeah.
potentially.
I'm something of a homebody. I tend not to really want to go many places, which is ironic when I spent most of my life thinking I don't want to go anywhere, and then suddenly being like, I want to go to Japan.
Which is like the furthest thing away from home.
It's like practically the other side of the world. Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. I kind of I think it's one of those things where when you're at, I'm kind of saying when I'm at home, I like being at home, and I'm
Hmm.
very comfortable with just being at home. And I sometimes I have days where I don't leave the flat, or maybe the furthest I go to is just go to the supermarket. I'm very comfortable with that. Um,
Hmm.
but when I go somewhere, I want to experience it.
Yeah.
I am not the type of guy who just wants to go and lie on a beach. I just can't. From a
Right.
holiday perspective, I cannot do that. I need to be
Yeah.
up and
In that
about.
sense,
I want to
in
experience
that sense,
things.
I think we're pretty similar. Yeah. I have to be doing something.
Yeah, and even if I go to a city, I love visiting cities. But again, I want to go to a museum, or I want to do a
Right.
guided tour or something, or I want to be amongst it. And
Yeah.
that's nice. So yeah, definitely on the same page with that. Um, I think that's it. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. I've only got one more that we can maybe
Okay.
finish on, which was do you have any particular ingredients that you're very fond of, or your go-to dishes to either cook, or if you're out at a restaurant, it's something that you would not be able to resist if it was on the menu?
Hmm. Well, I for not resisting things, I have a hard time saying no to pizza. I That is absolutely my favorite food, and there's a reason that's what I missed when I was in Japan. Um, and now that I've learned to appreciate the Japanese style of pizza, I feel like I've unlocked a new level of things that it's hard for me to say no to. Um, as for like a favorite ingredient, I don't know. I've got like a regular rotation of things that I like to cook. I end up cooking a lot of like chicken, because it's nice to just buy a whole chicken and then be able to cut it up and then do some of it baked, reserve like the back and some of the other things for making a stock, and then I can make chicken soup. And it's sort of it's this. It feels like it's this continual source of more and more food for me. So that's very practical. I don't know if that's like a favorite ingredient, but I eat a lot of it.
hmm
Uh, Yeah. What would you say, Scott Sword?
Um, at the moment, I guess 'cause it's topical because it's the summer. I've been making quite a lot of gazpacho these last few
Yes.
weeks, especially since I've finished work and on break and things at the moment. Because again, it's something that I only really tried since I moved over here. Because obviously in the UK, yeah, you can find gazpacho, but it's not the same because you haven't got the heat, so you don't appreciate it
Mm-hmm.
in the same way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also then recently we visited some family of my wife's, and they have I was going to say an allotment. They've more like a veg garden, and they grow a lot
Mm-hmm.
of their own tomatoes. And there's a quite big family gathering, but every member of the family or every group, subset of the family, all went home with a crate of tomatoes because they're just producing so much of it. Um, and because they're not store bought, there's just an intensity of the flavor because they're picked at a different time
Mm.
during the sort of the maturation process and things. And
Yeah.
I made my first gazpacho with them, and I tasted it, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is like
Mm-hmm.
something just unlocked with my brain." Going, I've been making gazpacho, but because the store bought ones, because maybe they've got a slightly thicker skin or they don't have as much juice, I'm having to add additional things like more cumin or more vinegar to give it a bit more of a punch. But
Mm-hmm.
now the tomatoes themselves have so much more flavor to them.
Yeah.
and it's smoother because there's not as much skin, so there's not the same like I don't mind bits in my gazpacho. I'm not picky in that sense, but it was such a smooth gazpacho. I was like, oh my god! I was just overjoyed by the entire thing. So
Yeah.
at the moment, I
I
know.
will say, yeah, access to fresh ingredients is one of the biggest things I miss from Japan because they have a whole culture of like when is this at its freshest, right? When is the
Mm,
peak time to have this dish? When is the peak time for this ingredient? And they will follow it like very carefully. And just as a relatively speaking smaller country, like in comparison to say the United States, it's easier to get it like straight from when it's still fresh. And I haven't necessarily had the same experience as you with gazpacho. I can't say the Spanish pronunciation of it. Um, but even then, like I know the exact sort of experience that you're referring to, where it's like all of a sudden you have something with truly fresh, like peak ingredients, and it's just transformative.
right. The same in the UK. There's, I mean, I think we've talked about this before. There's the fact that now with everything so global and with technology and stuff, you can have a lot of food all year round. But there is
Hmm.
something to be said of really appreciating things when they're very much in season.
Yeah.
The same here. I mean, something again. It's very. I'm finding now a lot of the time I'm talking about very simple ingredients or simple dishes, but especially with the way that Spanish people consume food, there's an appreciation for that. So like something as simple as watermelon. Never ate
Hmm.
it before I came over here, and I've had watermelon in the UK since. But again, it's not the same because it's not the same amount of
Right.
refreshment because you haven't got the heat contrasting with the cold melon, and also because
Hmm.
then the watermelon in the UK it's probably imported, so it's lost that little bit
Hmm.
of intensity or freshness along the way. Whereas here, even though you can buy watermelon kind of all year round, there is still a window where the watermelons are the best. And it's always that there
Hmm.
was this conversation I had with my mother-in-law where um, we see watermelon appearing in the supermarket, and then she'll be like, "No, no, 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 it's not ready yet. There's watermelon in the supermarket, but just wait a couple more weeks." So we wait 2 or 3 weeks, and then suddenly, then boom, we're in peak watermelon time. Like now we're in peak
Nice.
watermelon time. But then in a few weeks, it's going to drop off, and we're going to buy a watermelon, and then we're going to be like, "Nah, it's not the same now." And then you stop,
Hmm.
and then you have to wait for the next summer for it to kick in again. So yeah, it's one of those things, and just adapting a little bit more to that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
In terms of like dishes I cook, I don't often follow recipes, but I just love cooking with legumes, all different types of beans, and
Hmm.
I'll just chuck. In terms of food, I don't care really how the food looks as long as it tastes good. I'm not a big
Hmm.
fan of very arty, even though it's very impressive. I'm not a big fan of arty restaurants where they give you a very small portion. It looks very pretty, but I'm
Hmm.
the sort of guy just give me a plate with some stew in it, and I will be
Hmm.
as long as there's flavor in it, I will be very happy in that sense. So again, trying
Yep.
to stay very sort of traditional with with food, even though the stuff I'm cooking is not traditional because it's just random combinations of legumes, and then maybe I might put a little bit of chili in or a little bit of chicken or something just to sort of bulk it a bit. But even like
Hmm.
artichoke, I think I've talked about it before. Artichoke is an ingredient I hadn't eaten before I came over here as well. Because again, in the UK, we see artichoke as this very exotic kind of ingredient that you
Hmm.
only see on cooking shows, and they're like, "Oh, it's a very complicated vegetable, and you need to know how to cook it." It actually isn't too complicated. I need to actually. There's something I want to do. I want to buy raw artichoke and then cook it, like I've seen it on some of the cooking shows over here where they've cooked with it more often. But that's the one I normally go for.
Cool.
If I see artichoke on the menu in a restaurant, I'm picking it. No questions
Hmm.
asked. Love it. If it's inside like an omelette, or if it's a side dish or something, or if it's just oven roasted and you pick the leaves off and you eat all the fleshy bits and you leave all the hard bits behind and you get to the core, the heart, and it's just like, ah, oh, it's the best. Love it.
Yeah. Nice. There is one dish now I'm thinking of it that's a dessert that's unique to Japan as far as I know. Might I as far as I know, I don't know everything. But I do miss it. I do find myself missing it. So this isn't necessarily what the question was asking, but it is something that I'd never experienced before, and it sounds very strange. But now that I've had it, I sort of have fallen in love with this particular dessert. It's called honey toast, and it's not just honey on top of toast. It's there's the way that Japanese bread is sliced tends to be relatively thick, um, especially compared to like American toast, right? Like you could fit like maybe two or three, possibly even slices of American toast in like one slice of most Japanese toast. So as a result, you get like the top of the toast, which is browned, that gets very crunchy, and then the rest of the toast is still very soft. And so what they do is they put vanilla ice cream on top of this like the crunchy exterior, and they occasionally will like score into the toast these like slices essentially. So you can almost peel it apart like you've peeled apart if you've sectioned a mango, right? You can peel open the toast that way, and it's to allow the vanilla ice cream to like go into it as it melts from the heat of the toast, and then you pour honey on top of that, and that is delicious. And that is one particular dessert that I miss that I've been tempted to recreate it here, but it's going to be too much of a hassle
Hmm.
because I'd have to start by making my own bread so I could slice it the right way. But
Right. And you're trying to get the right type of bread consistency as well, right? Oh,
yeah,
I'm looking at pictures of it on Google now, actually. Oh man, yeah. There's a lot that I'm seeing which have a lot of additional accessories on top. But if it was just as simple, because I'm not a big, again, I'm not a sweet tooth, but if it was just the bread, vanilla ice cream, and honey, I'd be all over that. I'd
yeah.
very,
Oh, that's the version of it that I've had and that I just totally fell in love with. So that's one of the major desserts. There are a lot of foods that I miss from Japan. That's one of the desserts that I miss from Japan.
is it Shibuya? Is that what this is?
uh, Shibuya is a place in Tokyo.
Oh, okay. Because I'm looking up. Oh, I don't know. Oh, is it could it be? Oh, I don't know. So a lot of these pictures on. Oh no, they're saying Shibuya honey toast.
Maybe it's associated with that particular location. I've had it in like not Okinawa. I've had it in why am I blanking? Kyushu, on the southernmost island of Japan. So it's not limited to Shibuya. And I've had it like way up north where I lived in Hachinohe. But maybe it's most famous there. I don't know.
Hmm.
Might also be a style because that's another thing that you'll get, right? You can get different styles of Japanese food that's a similar base depending on where you are in Japan. Everywhere will have its own sort of like local version of a common dish. So maybe the Shibuya style of honey toast is one particular way of serving it as opposed to some others.
Maybe. I'm seeing only some of the images have the words. It's possible. Yeah, I don't know. Again, a little bit of research. Maybe we can. Oh, I'm saying, well, Wikipedia page is saying honey toast, also known as Shibuya toast, brick toast, and hanito.
I don't know about honeyto.
Okay.
Maybe that's another name for it.
Yeah.
That's just a shortened version of honey toast.
Oh, hanito. Oh, sure,
I
sure.
see what happened there.
Onomatopoeia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, maybe it's just yeah. Also, then regional dialect might change the name a little bit depending on the situation, right? Ah.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's cool. So yeah, when you said honey toast, I was immediately thinking like you mean like French toast or
Yeah.
something along that line, right? But I mean,
Yeah, it sounds very common, but it's actually a combination I've not encountered anywhere else.
because
And I thought it was incredible.
you're really right. The I mean, I wouldn't call it a slice. It's very much like a slab of toast, more or less. It's like a
Yeah.
brick. I see why they call it
Hmm.
brick toast. But then there are some I'm
Yeah.
seeing again. Maybe these are like recreations, like Western ones, where they've got like three, like what you call a normal slice of toast, but three of them stacked together. But that maybe looks like a
Oh, okay.
recreation of maybe using Western ingredients. I'm not
Probably.
sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Or maybe a local variation, but most likely I would say that's probably someone else trying to recreate it.
hmm, interesting. Yeah, that I don't know about. The one here, I'm trying to think. Yeah, again, I'm not really a dessert guy. That's the problem.
Hmm.
But I've seen things like they have what's it called in Spanish? Arroz de leche. Or rough con leche? Oh, no, I can't remember. But it's like the equivalent would be something like a rice pudding in the UK. So you're seeing
Ah.
certain things which are there are similarities, but then the flavor might be slightly different, or the consistency might be slightly different. It might be a little bit more baked or less baked or whatever.
Hmm.
But also like the things like crema catalana and flans and things are very common over here in Spain. But yeah, that's the problem. No sweet tooths. There's a lot of foods that then is automatically kind of blocked off to me a little bit since I'm not into
Yeah.
them. But it's very funny here though that there's quite a thing, especially in slightly more uh, low budget restaurants. But I'm saying that in a good way, where you just go to try
Hmm.
and have a nice easy three-course sort of lunch or something, where the dessert
Hmm.
could literally just be a couple of slices of melon.
Yeah.
They'll
Well, they'll
off
do that in Japan too. Yeah, it'll be some fruit. It's like this is the dessert. Yeah.
Right. Whereas in the UK that'd be impossible. There's no way
Hmm.
you could ever say, "Oh, can I just have a slice of melon as a dessert?" They'll look at you like, "Excuse me."
Yeah.
They'd find that very strange. Just to have a piece of
Yeah.
fruit for dessert. If you're at home, maybe that's different. But in a restaurant, you'd
Hmm.
never just have a piece of fruit as a dessert. That'd be very strange.
Yeah. That was definitely a moment of cultural difference when I went to Japan, and they were like, "Why does it say carrots for dessert?"
Or just even like a little
Yeah.
yogurt pot or something. Yeah, it's funny. It's just yeah, those differences. So there seems to be a bit of overlap there between sort of the Mediterranean way of thinking and then the
Mm.
Japanese way of thinking, even though the ingredients are different because of climate and stuff. But yeah, the way of thinking is different. Whereas then UK and US then has its own similarities in the way it thinks about food. It's
Hmm.
interesting.
Oh, I finally thought of something that fits. It's not exactly an ingredient, but it's the closest I think I'm going to come to a favorite ingredient. This is something I got hooked on in Japan. It's actually something somewhat famous for foreigners not liking it um, because it's somewhat unusual. But there's a type of fermented soybean called natto. And this is something that, like, if you go to Japan and you spend time with Japanese people, they're going to try and get you to eat it because they want to see your reaction, because foreigners famously are not supposed to like it. So that's the spirit in which I first had it, which was like, hey, try this stuff. And so I had some, and I knew they were looking for a big reaction. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to give you a big reaction. And I tried it, and I was like, okay, it's fine. Like, I didn't like it, I didn't dislike it. But over time, it got to the point where it's a fairly normal thing to just put on top of rice and have as part of a meal, usually some sort of breakfast. And so natto on rice for breakfast. And it got to a point where I would just get totally used to like staying in a Japanese hotel and getting natto with the rice on breakfast, or with my homestay. Once they found out I would eat it, they'd put it on my rice. And I eventually developed a taste for it. And now, like, I have it whenever I go to the Japanese store that I was mentioning earlier. I will, without fail, just pick up a bunch of things of natto just so that I can have some around. And it just totally livens up my breakfast for as long as it lasts. And then there's a sad period where I'm in between trips to the Japanese store, which is far enough away that I don't want to go there. Like, just because I've run out of natto, I want to wait till I'm really out of all the stuff that I buy there.
Mm,
Uh, and I have to go without it for a little while, but then I can get it back again.
yay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've just clicked on a BBC article about it, and yeah, the picture in particular is not very flattering because it looks a little bit like mucus.
Yeah, it's very goopy. That's the thing about, like, the consistency is usually what grosses people out about it.
Mm. It's kind of also like when it's not. I mean, not exactly the same, but when you take something like kidney beans or something or chickpeas out of a glass jar here, the
Hmm.
surrounding liquid that is in is also a little bit thicker. It's not
Right.
brine. It has there's residual, I guess, with I don't know what it is. It must be like some of the compounds that the beans
Hmm.
sort of leach off over time. It makes like this thick sort of consistency. I use that.
Hmm.
I don't rinse them. I just chuck it all
Oh
in if
yeah.
I'm making a stew. If I made some hummus the other day,
Hmm.
and I use some of that. I use that liquid in. I just chucked it all in. I did.
Yeah.
I sort of overcooked the chickpeas a bit, but the residual gloop or whatever it is, the surrounding liquid from the jar that went into the hummus.
I don't think I've actually done that with chickpeas when I was making hummus, but I definitely do that. It's like a standard recipe thing when you're making pasta, is to save some of the water from making the pasta
Mm,
because it adds a lot of body to like a sauce or some other step that you're going to use later on. So they always tell you to, reserve some of the pasta water.
right.
And I imagine it's a similar sort of effect.
Yeah. Helps emulsification and all this sort of thing. But also just like it has flavor, right? Especially then
Yeah.
if depending on how you're using the beans, if the beans aren't going to be in a stew for a long time, so they're not going to soak up flavor, then you've got free flavor right there. And yeah, it's not going to make it too thin because that's nothing worse than a thin stew. So just it does thicken up a little bit.
Hmm.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. We haven't got any Japanese stores around here. It's more common in the UK to find Chinese stores rather than Japanese stores. Those haven't taken off. There's a lot of Japanese restaurants, but I haven't seen Japanese stores. Maybe in London might be the
It's been
exception. But
it's been in like the last 10 years or so, I want to say, that we've actually started getting Japanese grocery stores, or they've started to sort of expand into my area for a long time. So even back, like I think back when I was living in this area for when I was growing up, there's been a story that is or a store that is like a superstore essentially that has all sorts of Asian food, right? They have it's primarily Chinese, but they've also got Korean stuff, Japanese stuff, just all these foods from across Asia. They're an Asian grocer. They've been around for ages, and so for a while after I came back from Japan, that was like my default. And that place is good, but it's got such a wide selection. It's difficult for me to like search through exactly for what I want if I just want some Japanese food staples. And so I've been very happy to see occasionally at this point there are at least three different Japanese grocery stores. They're all like a half hour or more drive for me. So they're not exactly super close, but they're close enough that I can go there with some frequency now. And yeah, that's that's been a happy thing for me to watch develop over time.
that's great. I'm trying to think in the UK, at least where I grew up, the first sort of yeah, I don't know what we'd call them. Yeah, like a store catering to a particular type of cuisine was maybe Polish. Because there's quite a big influx of Polish immigrants into, especially into Scotland. So they were popping up. And then, yeah, I think in Edinburgh, I was seeing more Chinese and then maybe Indian, because again, because Indian food is so popular.
Yeah, I was gonna guess Indian. I was a little surprised when you said Polish. There are some Polish grocery stores in my area as well.
Hmm. Um, but then in Spain, I'm trying to think now. Again, if you go to the very big cities, then you're more likely to find these sort of things. But again, the one that's most likely is going to be Chinese, because again, there's not a
Hmm.
big Indian population over here. There aren't as many Polish people here. There's quite a lot of Ukrainians actually. So I don't know if
Hmm.
there. I wouldn't be surprised in the future if Ukrainian stores might start popping up a little bit. But yeah, Chinese is definitely the one over here. Even though Japanese restaurants are very common, I don't know if I've seen any. Uh, yeah, I haven't seen any Japanese specific stores. But again, maybe I'm in an area where there wouldn't be one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Oh, we got a question from the chat. How often do you drive in Europe? Again, depends on where you live. There's a lot of regional disparity here. In Spain, I mean, the way I'd probably describe it is people will generally walk when they're able to. People who live in the center of towns will very much walk as much as possible. I mean, I've said it before. Like the distinction is, I've got my local supermarket 2 minutes walk away. It's that close.
Hmm.
So when you don't need to go by car, then you there are a lot of local options, and I've got shops that are all around me. I can very much function within my local neighborhood for most basic amenities and necessities. So we don't need to drive. Um, I guess it's more one of these things where because I've bought a car recently, so because we've got the car, then there are certain things that we're able to do that we couldn't do before, or before we'd have to take one specific trip if we're on foot. to go somewhere, and that'd be it. Whereas now we can do 3 times as much in the same period of time, and we can go between different parts of the town more easily. Or if we're doing something, then instead of going to the local supermarket, if we're passing a supermarket on our way home in the car, then we'll go there, and we'll kind of do two birds with one stone kind of attitude. But yeah, if you're living in a city, then most people will not drive. They'll take public transport or they'll walk because we like that. If you're going to places like Amsterdam or something, then there's a lot of biking culture there. But again, if you live in the countryside or you live outside of a town where there isn't public transport available, then people have to drive. Where I grew up in the north of Scotland, people had to drive. There was just, you couldn't function otherwise. Um, I mean, if you lived in the village or the little villages and they had a local shop, okay, you could do some basic stuff without driving. But if you had to do almost anything, you had to drive. So yeah, again, there's a lot of regional diversity, but I think the difference is a lot of the population centers are built in a way to have high density, so you haven't got like the urban sprawl that you get in the US, where there's a lot of suburban.
Hmm.
There are suburban areas, but it's not the same. So when a new suburb or new um, construction of or neighborhood of houses is built, there has to be local amenities to go with it. So immediately they're having to think about bus connections or train connections depending on where it's located, supermarkets, all this sort of thing. A lot of the time what will happen is they'll have a new supermarket will spring up on the outside of a town, and a lot of people are like, well, why is this supermarket being built here? And then within a few months or a couple of years, there's suddenly a housing estate around it. So a lot of the time when these houses are being built, they're having to think about local infrastructure and how will people function if they live there. How easy can they get to work? How easily can they do their food shopping? That sort of thing. You don't have the
Hmm.
same low density sprawl that I see when I'm watching videos about the US and things.
Right. Yeah, the U.S. is definitely, I think low density is a good word for it. Because I lived in Japan, and Japan is sort of in a similar situation where a lot of the infrastructure is just planned around, not having to go too far. Like you were talking about your 2 minutes from your grocery store. I was, a 3 minute walk from the closest grocery store, a, maybe 10-minute walk from the next closest one, and a 15-minute walk from the next closest one, except that one's in the other direction. So it's all like totally walkable in terms of what you needed to get by in your day-to-day life. There was a public transit system where they had buses run through that I could take. Like I lived in Japan for 5 years, never owned a car there, and got around just fine. So huge difference there. People do own cars in Japan because it's sort of a luxury, sort of like you say, you can get to places that you otherwise couldn't.
Mm,
But that's not really, in a lot of cases, it's just not a necessity. It's more a convenience to have a car. Now there are parts of Japan where I think probably you would need to have a car, but there's certainly nothing like it is in the States. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I recently just purchased, I'm planning this big Japan trip in October, and I recently got my Japan Rail Pass. So
mm,
that is going to grant me access to like pretty much any JR train, and I paid for it all up front. And the like distances that I'm going to be covering this time is like crazy, right? So I'm going to like fly into Tokyo, and then I'm going to go down to Kyushu, and then I'm going to go all the way up north to Hachinohe where I used to stay, and then I'm going to come back down towards Kanagawa, and then I'm going to go back into Tokyo. And just the freedom of the ability to just get to wherever I want from any other place in the country without needing to own a car or rent a car or do anything like that is so incredible. It's just astonishing to me, like how much more convenient it is to get around in Japan and to just sort of do things on a whim because you have that sort of access via public transit.
right. It really unlocks so many things, and we've talked about it before, like just if you've got the luxury to choose, am I going to fly across the country, am I going to take train, or am I going to drive? That's great, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. So having the ability for them to still, or even if it's from getting from the suburban area into the center of town with public transport is just so important.
Mm-hmm.
It's also in Europe, like there's a real focus on what we mixed use of
Mm-hmm.
buildings. So I'm thinking of all the streets around me. The ground floor, as we'd call it in British English, all of it is going to be some sort of commercial usage, offices,
Mm-hmm.
shops, whatever. And then you've got living space above it. And then even
Mm-hmm.
if I'm thinking, because I'm in the center of the town, so if I'm thinking more towards like the outside portions, suburbs, quote unquote, it's still flats. They're not houses. There are some areas which are houses, but not so many. But even then, there might be some ground floor flats, but a lot of the time there are businesses on the ground floor. So you're mixing that usage. So if you've got people living and then you've got businesses in the same space, then it's completely natural that people will not drive everywhere. They know they can go to the travel agents that's down the street or go across to the electro-domestic shop that's across the street or whatever. And you're all doing everything within that small radius. You're not having to think, right, we have to drive across town to go to this place, drive to the other side of town to go to this place, and so on.
Right.
It just depends on what it is you're doing. So we can kind of alter our lifestyle or the way we do things based upon the availability of things. It's not a all or nothing kind of deal, which is
Mm-hmm.
which is nice. I wish Spain and the UK was a little bit more biker friendly and more public transport focused in that sense. Edinburgh has a good bus service, relatively speaking, um, but I wish it was a little bit more bike centric. But it is what it is. The Northern European countries have got that sort of nailed down a lot better. Um, so yeah, it just depends. But I wouldn't like. We've only got a car recently because we've needed to have it, especially having it, about to start a family and things. And there have been a couple of times where
Mm-hmm.
we've been going to certain places where we could have walked, but because my wife is heavily pregnant, we'll just go in the car. And even though it's a very short car
Yeah.
trip, and it's not really necessary to take the car, it's better for her especially that we just take the car and she's a lot more comfortable. Um, but yeah, if I was living in a really, really, really big city, like I'll take Barcelona as an example, right? I can't even imagine driving in Barcelona. That just sounds hellish to me, just because there's
Mm-hmm.
just so much traffic, and I just wouldn't even contemplate doing that. You just lose so much time out of your day doing those things. So yeah, it's an interesting distinction. Um,
Yeah. Oh, there's a good point in chat here that if you need to travel on unusual hours, like doctors on night shifts,
yeah,
it's good to have a car.
right,
Yeah.
right, and I get that. I think that's the thing. It's a case of where there are people who need to drive for certain reasons, and I think that's the again we get a little bit political, but I think there's a lot of things about trying to discourage car use in cities, and I agree with that to a point. If you there's a thing that's been happening in the UK, but also here too, where they're trying to narrow car streets. So instead of having two lanes in each direction, it's one lane in each direction, and then the space that's freed up, you use it for pedestrians or bike lanes or whatever. So I'm in
Mm-hmm.
favour of that. I don't think car usage should be discouraged because there are people who have to drive, but it should be
Mm-hmm.
that balance, right? Where if it's not necessary to take the car, then you should have other options, but the options have to be available. There have to be safe bike
Right.
lanes, or there have to be a good public transport infrastructure or whatever. But if there are people who
Right.
really, really, really need to drive, then they should be able to drive, and it's not a black or white thing. There should be a nice grey area in the middle where everyone can do what they need to do.
Agreed.
Mhm. Well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions in chat. And since we've been going for, at least on stream, it's been almost 4 hours by the time I edit it down for the podcast. It won't be, or for the YouTube version, Spotify version, it won't be as long. But still, I think that's a good point to wrap up. I've seen another question pop up in chat, but that's Strider trying to provoke. I don't know. I don't even know what. I don't. I'm still kind of confused what the question means. Who's the stronger half?
Who's stronger? Who's stronger? Me or you?
As in physically.
I'm gonna. I don't know. We can interpret that however we want. I'm gonna say that you're stronger than I am, and you can take that however you want.
All right. Well, then I'll just say the opposite. You're stronger than me, and we'll just leave it as that then.
Perfect. We couldn't ask for a better ending.
Um. So yeah, I'll have to wrestle the next episode. I don't think anybody wants to either watch that or listen to that. So yeah, we'll just have to leave that in the leave that to, like, we'll just leave it to the void, and yeah, you can all make up your own minds what exactly that question was meant to be. But yeah, well, Rook, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. So yeah, thank you very much for always for the chat, and hopefully everybody
Yeah, always a
listening's enjoyed it.
pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you as well, Scott Sword. This podcast has been a ton of fun to do, and it was very fun to do this live. I hope we were able to keep these people company satisfactorily, and I hope that as you are listening to this on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, wherever you are in time, I hope that we've been helping to keep you company as well.
Absolutely, and yeah, we can see if people like this, then this is something that we can do again in the future. I think there's a lot of people on Twitch who are just having us in the background while they were lurking, and I think that's absolutely fine. That's what these streams are. My streams anyway are kind of for. So if people have enjoyed it, then that's the main thing. So yeah, people on Twitch will say goodbye to you properly, and we'll get a raid going. But for YouTube and Spotify, thank you very much for listening. And yeah, this is obviously the September episode, so we'll see what we're gonna do and how we'll work things out for the October episode. But yeah, thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to leave any comments down below, or if there's any other questions you want to put forward for a another quick fire round at some point, feel free to leave them down below. And
Yeah, we were not very quick fire on the quick fire round, but maybe we'll get better at that with practice.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I guess this is the September episode, right? So I hope August has treated you well, and I hope September treats you well until we speak again for next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.